I've been using this Super Metroid outro for the entire run of this channel, so I like Metroid, right? Well, yeah. Ever since I got into these games as a teenager, it didn't take long for it to be one of my favorite series. They have this awesome gameplay loop that I never get tired of, and the atmosphere they give off is just, so good. But my first experience with this series wasn't good, let me tell you. Because my first Metroid was the first Metroid. I got a 3DS a few months after launch for the big $80 price drop. To compensate early adopters, Nintendo made the 3DS Ambassador program. Anyone who bought this system before that big price drop got 10 free NES games for everyone else, and 10 free Game Boy Advance games that never got put up in the 3DS eShop for purchase. The NES side, I didn't get much use out of. I played Zelda 2 a bit. I enjoyed doing that. I also played some Metroid, but wasn't into it. Although I knew the first game was still rough around the edges. I was still willing to try out Fusion when I would get to that later in the year. And I loved it, but I'll get to gushing about that in a few weeks. Because I figured it's finally time to talk about these games. At least the 2D ones. It's the series' 35th anniversary, so what better way to celebrate? You know Nintendo's not going to. God, I hope I'm wrong. Close enough. Anyway, Metroid 1 on the NES. I've barely played this one. Every time I try to get into it, I just get lost and not have the motivation to continue. It felt archaic to me, a game from a bygone era, so I just never felt the need to deep dive into it. But hey, in honor of seeing these games evolve over time, let's actually sit down and play it. I'm honestly expecting these first two games to be hard. Not in the difficulty sense, more like hard to stomach. A lot of NES and Game Boy games haven't aged gracefully and just feel old. I might enjoy them though, who knows. Anyways, I've been saying see a next mission for ages, so let's actually start one of those missions. Alright, so basically, Metroid's story goes like this. A bunch of leaders of alien planets got together one day and formed the Galactic Federation to make a bunch of cool sci-fi stuff. Earth was like,
hey, can we have some of that?
And the Federation was like,
yeah, sure.
All was well in the galaxy until the space pirates came along and ruined everything. They kept looting ships, stealing and pillaging a bunch of stuff, and just decided to be rambunctious in general. By the way, these weren't just random-ass aliens either. There was an entire race of these things, called the Space Pirates. So yeah, that's a thing. They even got their own homeworld. The Galactic Federation was having none of that, so they made a police force to try and stop them. But the Space Pirates were too powerful, so the Federation gave their police a bunch of super weapons, called them hunters, and that worked apparently. At least a little bit. One of these Space Pirate raids, their almost leader Ridley, killed little Samus Returns' parents, so she was raised by a race of bird people called the Chozo. They infused her with Chozo DNA, trained her to have near superhuman acrobatics, gave her this fancy power suit, and then she became a hunter for the Galactic Federation. After figuring out that she can do this on a regular basis, the Federation just decided to send this one-woman army into the heart of the space pirate base on Zebes and kill their leader, Mother Brain. Yeah, their leader is just some brain in a tube somewhere. They're cloning a bunch of alien parasites that killed off the Chozo or something, so you gotta go stop them. What are these parasites called, you may ask? Metroid. The game itself, though, has literally nothing. It's an NES game. Metroid's main contribution to society becomes apparent pretty quick. When you start out, you're pathetic. You just have this dinky blaster that has low range and barely does any damage. You keep moving right, and you even come up to a dead end. Your average 80s player would have just been like, wait, what do I do? Why can't Metroid crawl? Well, Metroid introduces the revolutionary concept of moving left. You couldn't even go backwards in Super Mario Bros., and now we have a game that's built around it. Because in realizing this is an option at all, you find Metroid's main shtick immediately. Gaining new abilities. Because now that you have the Morph Ball, you can go through the hole in the wall, and the game just opens up from there. You can go anywhere. As long as you have the right abilities, of course. Just like with the Morph Ball letting you go through narrow tunnels, missiles give you more firepower with limited ammo and let you open red doors. The Ice Beam lets you freeze enemies and uses platforms. The High Jump boots let you jump higher. Your main form of progression is gaining new abilities, which let you reach new areas or find more abilities, along with increasing your missile capacity and health. Metroid is essentially an action and adventure game in the form of a side-scrolling platformer. Because Metroid and later Castlevania Symphony of the Night were the first to adopt this style of gameplay, the subgenre is generally called Metroidvania, and I love this kind of gameplay loop. It was a great sense of power growth. You start out as a weakling, but you quickly gain the screw attack, which lets you one-shot most enemies just by jumping into them. The Various suit also doubles your defense, so between these two upgrades, you feel totally invincible by comparison. It makes you want to explore everything and get as overpowered as you possibly can. Metroid had that kind of vision in 1986, and that core gameplay loop is still there even in the first attempt at a game like this. Just by exploring and trying to find the way forward, you'll you'll likely find this gate that you can't progress through until you beat both major bosses of the game, which you can fight in either order. You can even get every major upgrade in the game before fighting a single one. Seriously, you have a surprising amount of freedom for a game on NES. It really reminds me of the first Zelda in that regard. It's incredible what they were able to do so early on in the NES's life, and I respect the first Metroid a lot because of that. But you can easily tell this is the first game of its kind, because first of all, there's no map, and most areas look very similar, sometimes even looking like the exact same room copy-pasted somewhere else. Now, at first, I was oddly into a mapless Metroidvania. The way I enjoy these games basically live and die with their map system. If the map's good, the game's good. If the map is confusing or unintuitive, it's not fun for me. It's the main reason I couldn't get into Hollow Knight at first. In that game, the map is only updated when you rest at a save point, so you're essentially running around blind when you go into a new room. Not only that, but you first have to find the map of the area and buy it before you can start jotting down where you've been. I hated that at first. I practically live on the map screen in these kinds of games. But after I looked past that and tried to know my surroundings, I found that oddly engaging, and I knew how to get around much better as a result. I was hoping that I could find a similar enjoyment in OG Metroid, and I did. At first. The first area of the game was pretty easy to figure out just with my own short-term memory. But the issues arose when I stopped playing. I came back the next day forgetting basically everything. These two big vertical shafts are at least different colors, but everything else is so samey that it all blends together and it's hard to figure out where you are. Even when I'm looking at a fan-made map. Yeah, I used a guide for this game, and save states. I'm not crazy. Because the thing is, I get that it's the NES. I get that they wanted to make your own maps, but that's stupid and I'm not doing it. The only reason why I wasn't completely lost was because I've played Metroid games so many times that I already had a vague understanding of what I was looking for. If this was my first Metroid, I'd be lost as soon as I left the starting cave. And I was. I might have gotten missiles on my first time playing back in the day, maybe the long beam, but that was it. I doubt I even stepped foot past Brinstar. And that's not even mentioning how I start out with 30 health whenever you die, forcing you to farm for health whenever you're low. There's these little farming spots that have enemies infinitely respawn, but it's still agonizingly slow, and they respawn the instant you grab their pickup. So it's pretty often I get hit just trying to get my energy or missile. And keep in mind that each health pickup restores 5 energy, and if you get hit, you usually lose 10. Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but when the enemies come out in such awkward spots, it happens pretty often. You might occasionally find a pickup that restores 20 energy, but with the enemies that infinitely respawn out of these little holes, they only give you 5. And sometimes the game just outright refuses to give you more health no matter how many you kill. So pretty much every time you die, you have to spend like 10 to 20 minutes doing this tedious task just to get back to full health. Which I usually just skipped and decided to deal with the low health, like the good at video games person that I am. It's much quicker once you get the screw attack, but it's still so slow. The only way to fully recharge your health, as far as I know, is to get an energy tank to increase it, which there are only like 7 of. So between having to do this whenever you die or load up your password, not knowing where you're supposed to go, playing OG Metroid is very discouraging. It's really easy to just put the controller down and stop playing. The maze-like world design doesn't mesh well with not being able to keep track of where you are. It almost feels like the game's constantly pushing back against you, like it doesn't want you to finish it. For a kid in the 80s, it could have been really enjoyable to devote yourself to figuring out everything in this game, because you reasonably could as long as you're willing to write everything down. But that was 35 years ago. This game's old enough to have a midlife crisis. There's pretty much no reason to play it in today's gaming landscape when there's a bazillion other games that do the same thing better. I only stayed sane due to the fact that I was using a guide. There was even one point where after 30 minutes it felt like I made no progress, and I actually decided to do schoolwork instead because it felt like the more enjoyable alternative. So why the hell did I really like this game? I honestly don't know, but maybe I can try to explain it. At the game's core, it's still Metroid. It's still a style of game that I enjoy a lot, so even in the series' unrefined state, I was still able to find an enjoyable time to my surprise. I expected Metroid to be a slog, a cryptic, unfun mess of a game. But when you actually know what you're doing, or if someone else explains it to you, it's this weird 80s kind of fun, like having someone tell you the rules to a board game or Dungeons & Dragons or something. Because once the game gets going, it gets going. You get every major ability, you tear Trade apart, Ridley goes down like a little bitch despite having the power to slow down time itself, and it's finally time to destroy Mother Brain. But not before you swap out the Wave Beam for the Ice Beam, deal with these stupid Metroids. Yeah, beams don't stack in the first 2 games. So if you need the ability to freeze things instead of having the Wave Beam's superior damage output, then you have to go back to what the other beam is. It's dumb. Like, really dumb. Start doesn't do anything except for pausing the game. Why can't you just swap out your beams in a simple menu? You only have to do this once, but it still doesn't make any sense why you need to. But anyway, after going through the final hallway of parasites to get to the final boss, which feels like more of an endurance test than a boss, Mother Brain doesn't attack you directly. There's a bunch of orbs and lasers in the way that you have to dodge while you destroy each door with missiles? I don't know what these things are, I never have. Then you do the same thing to Mother Brain itself. It'll take you a few tries, but it's not too bad of a fight. Just boring. And if you lose, you start at the beginning of the area with 30 health just like usual. But the Metroids drop decent health and ammo, so it's not as annoying as it could be. After beating Mother Brain, the planet's about to explode, so you very carefully jump up this long corridor so you don't die. Well, that's nothing to worry about. They gave you way more time than you need. Anyway, you complete your mission, bringing peace to the galaxy once more, but it may be invaded by the other Metroid. I don't know what that means. Probably just setting up for Super Prime, I don't know. It was the NES, whatever. What I really like though is you get a slightly different ending depending on how long you took to finish the game. If you take longer than 10 hours, you get Samus crying away from the camera, okay. 5 to 10 hours gets you a fist bump, like, yeah, we did it. But if you finish in 3 to 5 hours, Samus takes off her helmet and she's a girl? Although it's the 80s, that could have been a dude. Nope, that is definitely a female. Like, seriously, why the hell do you get Samus in a bikini when you finish in under an hour? I like the jumpsuit ending for 1 and 3 hours better, personally. Like, I know this would be a common thing for the series at the point where Zero Suit has 2 ults for it in Smash, but it always felt kind of weird to me. Not really a bad thing, just something that personally ever so slightly bothered me. But if you happen to be playing this game in the 80s, this was a really cool subversion of expectations. I doubt Samus was the first female protagonist in a video game, but most people just kinda assume there was a dude under that suit. And aside from the manual referring to Samus as he, there was never anything saying whether Samus was male or female. Most people just assume Samus was a man, and when you see they were actually playing as a woman the whole time, a normal person would have been like, hey, that's cool. And that's just about the best female protagonist you can have. It doesn't really matter what their gender is, they just happen to be female. It's obviously no secret nowadays, which is why I didn't bother trying to hide it, but it was a cool twist back then. And I doubt it would have the same impact nowadays, which is probably a good thing. There's like a bajillion good female protagonists in video games now, and I hope I don't have to explain why that's awesome. There isn't really much to do afterwards. Maybe put in the Justin Bailey code to play through the game without your suit and all your upgrades, but that's about it. Alternatively, you can play the Japanese Famicom Disk System version. It's a slightly better version of the game with save data, enhanced music, and less lag, which is nice, but it doesn't really matter which version you play. They're about the same. Anyway though, Metroid. About what I expected, honestly. Sure, I didn't expect to enjoy it like I did, but I only liked it because I like this kind of game. If you've never played a Metroid game in your life and you want to start with the first game, just play Zero Mission. It's a damn good remake that I'll be getting into in a separate video. But if you're still interested in the OG Metroid, it's really one of those games that's only fun with a guide. It's too cryptic without one. Not quite Zelda 1 cryptic, but you'll definitely test your patience to its limits. But hey, I get it. Metroid was the first of its kind, so it was expected to have a game so rough around the edges at first. Besides, it only gets better from here. If Metroid 1 was the flawed first attempt, Metroid 2 is the weird middle child. It is an improvement over the first, but still archaic and easy to get lost in, which I'll at least accept that they still couldn't do maps because of the hardware that it was on, but it definitely makes a marathon like this harder to get into. A lot of games have what I would call first game syndrome. I doubt I'm the first one to call it that. It's when they don't really know what they want to do the first time around and don't have the development time to polish everything up, but with the sequel, they take what works and improve on it to make something great. Metroid 2 still feels like it's suffering from first game syndrome because it still has a lot of the same issues as the first, even if some of it's improved. Although, I remember really enjoying Metroid 2 when I first played it in like 2012, even if I didn't finish it. While it might be hard to get through for a first timer, I'm not too worried about this one. And hey, there was obviously something good here because it ended up being remade twice. Once by a single fan and once officially. I'll be giving both those their own looks later, but for now, it's time for the return of Samus. Just like the first game, there's no in-game story, but we luckily have a remake to fall back on. Unlike Zero Mission, Samus Returns actually explains what's happening. So after the events of the first game, and I think the Prime games too, they never specified how long Metroid 2 takes place after the first. But anyway, the Galactic Federation sent out an expedition team out to SR-388 and figure out this is the home world of the Metroids. Being the pesky jellyfish they are, the Federation unanimously agreed that these things need to be eradicated. So they sent Samus out to kill all of them. Yeah, I read the last one of them. On Game Boy though, you just boot it up and go on your merry way to genocide without any context. All you've got is a counter telling you how many Metroids are left, with a local counter when you pause the game. And boy did Sammy come prepared. She starts off with 30 missiles as opposed to the usual 0. Each missile expansion gives 10 this time as well. And trust me, you'll be needing those because Metroids can only be damaged with missiles. Metroid 2 isn't quite like the first game. Instead of having 2 main bosses to defeat and going back to a central area, you have to hunt down and kill Metroids. So you go from area to area, they all look the same, killing every Metroid in that area until you cause an earthquake, making the lava lower so you can go to the next one. That's it. That's the game. The linearity at least makes it easier to find a way around, because this is the only Metroid I can think of where there's barely any backtracking. There's little reason to actually go back to a previous area. I'm pretty sure everything can be found on your first trip, too. That's really bizarre for a Metroid game. I like going back to old places with new abilities to find new stuff. There's still no map, but the structure makes a map less necessary. Having to keep one smallish area in your short-term memory is much more manageable than having to figure out how to go from place to place in a non-linear order. So while I don't really like the new structure of the game that much, I'll at least forgive it for the system limitations. If they really couldn't put in a map, then making it more linear was definitely the right move. Especially since this thing was on a Game Boy. You can make your own maps on the NES when you're at home, but good luck doing that on a bus or something without looking like a crazy person. And because this was on Game Boy, they had to redesign Samus a bit due to the lack of color. The Void suit still doubles her defense, but now she's got the weird-ass shoulder pads we all know and love. The arm cannon has a different barrel when it's in missile mode, too. I always liked the redesign, just having a color swap felt weird. Wait, if it was on Game Boy, then why is it in color? Well, I loaded it up in MGBA and it just had color and it didn't look bad, so I played the whole game like that. Metroid 2 apparently had Super Game Boy support, so it has color palettes coded in. It's not native color like Link's Awakening DX or Pokemon Gold and Silver, but it's better than nothing. Seriously, why did Nintendo never emulate this feature? Simulating the OG Game Boy screen is cool and all, but when I can play the game in color, I'd rather do that. The graphics aren't the only things they changed. The controls in general feel smoother. For starters, you can crouch to hit those enemies at knee level without bombs. That does mean that you have to crouch twice to go into Morph Ball, but it's never an issue in any of these games. You can shoot downwards while in the air too. That's nice. The camera feels too zoomed in though. The camera does move behind you to let you see further ahead, but enemies can still catch you off guard. I get that it's the Game Boy, but getting hit by enemies that I can barely see is stupid. Maybe that's why I hated these assholes that get in the way of your space jumping or spider balling. At least it makes finally getting the screw attack cathartic as hell. Yeah, let it rip, bitches. Wait, where was I? I don't know. New abilities, I guess. The spider ball lets you slowly move along walls, and the space jump lets you jump infinitely. It has weird timing to it, though. You have to jump again just as you're falling. I don't really know how to describe it. This is more or less muscle memory to me at this point. I swear, it doesn't always work like it should, and I just end up awkwardly falling back down. It's a pain in the ass. There's the spring ball too, letting you jump while on Morph Ball so you don't have to rely on bombs. Don't get me wrong, you can do some crazy stuff with Morph Bombs, but having the option to not use them is really nice and way faster. There's a few new beams too, but aside from the Ice Beam, they're all kind of the same. I think Plasma does the most damage, but Wave and Spazer might as well not have any difference. While they don't stack, there is one hidden place where you can freely choose whichever one you want, but you never need to, which makes me question why this is a thing at all. Start Still just pauses the game. I don't understand why you can't just swap them in a menu, seriously. But it's not an issue like in the last game. They more or less give you the Ice Beam the one time you need it, so they recognize how stupid beam swapping is. Because here's the thing, your main goal is killing Metroids, which can only be damaged by missiles, so getting a beam upgrade barely means anything. Every other enemy dies in about the same time anyway, and oddly enough, there isn't much else to fight. There's a lot of repeating enemy types, and there aren't even any bosses aside from the few Omega Metroids in the final boss. Seeing how you go from area to area doing the same thing the whole time, the game starts to get repetitive very quickly. It starts to feel less like an adventure and more like a job. Maybe that's what they were going for, but there was a point where it felt like I was doing this simply because I had to. It didn't take long before I started going on autopilot. Most of what you're doing just isn't interesting. It doesn't help that the music in this game sucks. Decent music can make more of a difference than you realize, and there isn't anything here other than the main theme. The overworld theme that plays at the start of the game in the main cave kicks ass. Everything else is just noise. literally. Like, they're trying to go for ambience, but the Game Boy either couldn't handle that or they didn't do it properly. Most of the music just ends up sounding like weird bleeps and bloops. Video game music can be incredible, but the music in Metroid 2 sounds like what your grandma thinks video game music sounds like. And the song that plays inside of buildings, it just gets annoying. The only other good track is the credits theme, so there's seriously only like 2 good songs in this game. That's sad. I really feel that if the music was better, the game wouldn't have felt nearly as boring. Because while you may be doing the same stuff all the time, at least you would have had some good tunes to go along with it. I'm thinking that may be a big reason why I actually enjoyed Pokemon Channel. The music in that game is fire. But in Metroid 2, you're just doing the same stuff all the time with nothing to keep your brain stimulated. It doesn't help with how hilariously easy most Metroids are to kill. They don't get difficult until the 3rd state. I think they're called Zetas. But most of the Alpha and Gamma variety, they go down so easily they border on regular enemy as opposed to mini-boss. Omegas are the only ones that are straight up hard, and even then, that's only because of how hard health is to come by in the areas they show up in. You remember how annoying energy farming was in the first game? Well, they only half fixed it. There was these points that will either fully heal you or replenish all your missiles. But they're in such inconvenient places that they usually fail at what they're supposed to do. They're not right next to a save point or something. They're often at the top of some ravine that you need to use the spider ball to slowly get to begin with, or maybe they're in some random cave that's hard to remember how to enter. I swear, some areas don't have these at all, meaning that you either have to backtrack through areas that all look the same, or you have to energy farm anyway. The frustrating part is that they fixed having to do this. It's just that energy recharges end up in such awkward places that going to them is more trouble than it's worth. But I'll still take only having to do this once or twice over farming whenever I die. At least you start at full health this time, and if you die, you just reload your last save. Pretty standard for a game like this. Oh yeah, this game has save points now. How have I not mentioned that yet? No more having to kill yourself just to save or get your password. But at the end of these annoyances is one last Metroid. You've been through hell hunting down every last one of these bastards, and it's finally time to finish this. You're so far down into the planet that there's nothing here. It really goes to show how deadly these Metroids are. They're so high in the food chain that they're the only things down here. Aside from a war-class bounty hunter, of course. So yeah, it's a nice, tranquil walk to the final section, more or less. The calm before the storm, so to speak. They're luckily not mean enough to make you fight the final boss on low health and give you your energy and missiles back. The Chozo statue is practically destroyed, too, Jesus. At least you got your Ice Beam for the single time that you actually need it. Because when you go down the final corridor, your Metroid counter starts going up. And yep, more larval Metroids. Ironically, these things are stronger than their Alpha and Gamma counterparts. That never made sense to me. But after killing a few more of them, it's time to take down the Queen, and it's a surprisingly hard fight. You need an obscene amount of missiles to kill this thing, like 160 or something like that. But that's the harder way to do it, because you're supposed to shoot a missile up its mouth to stun it and lay a bomb in its stomach a few times. I didn't realize that's what you're supposed to do at first, because you have a super small window to actually shoot her in the mouth. But once I saw a video walkthrough, the fight instantly became easy. I went from maybe 15 attempts to 2. It's a fairly standard boss once you figure that out. But weirdly enough, you can actually run away from the fight. I don't know why. Maybe it's so that you can fight her at full health and ammo without having to deal with the enemies in the previous hallway, but that's the only thing I can think of. After finishing your genocidal rampage, it turns out there's still one more Metroid, a hatchling. It doesn't even attack you, it's a baby. So instead of killing it, Samus just takes a leisurely stroll with it back to the ship. It's a really cool subversion of expectations. You totally expect to have to kill it, but the game doesn't even give you the option to. Again, it's a baby, come on. And it's not like saving it is gonna have any repercussions or anything. An oddly peaceful end to a game about committing genocide. So yeah, that was Metroid 2, Return of Samus. It wasn't bad or anything, but it's still pretty rough to get through. And the main reason for that is the same as the first game. There was no map, which makes it easy to get lost. The decision to make the game more linear definitely alleviated that, but you'll still get lost. There's no way around it. You practically need a map to enjoy this game casually. Even if you gave the game a map, there's still the repetitive nature of it. You do the same thing over and over. It gets old, especially with a weak soundtrack. And just like last time, the only reason why I was enjoying myself was because I'm a massive Metroid fan. If you aren't, don't bother with OG Metroid 2. This game has 2 remakes. pick one. But hey, it's $4 on the 3DS eShop if you're really that curious. This game really tried to do some cool things, but the technology still wasn't there yet. The first two games are two peas in a pod in that sense. They're both archaic, but ahead of their time. There's some great games here, it's just that they clearly didn't have the hardware to be great. So what happens when they make a Metroid game after the technology is there? Well, let's just say third time's the charm. As soon as you see that title screen, you know you're in for a treat. The first two Metroid games weren't anything too special. They were important for their time and had a lot of influence, but as games, you weren't really missing much by not playing them. But the guys and gals at Research and Development 1? Just rolls off the tongue. Anyway, they had to have known how much potential a game like this had, but trying to do that on NES or Game Boy just wasn't happening. Fast forward to the Super Nintendo, and they could finally make the game Metroid was always meant to be. And you can tell they brought their A game with this one right from the start. The infant Metroid from the end of Metroid 2 just killed everyone at the research station. That's why you kill them all. These things are omni-powerful. I don't understand why they didn't just keep this place on ice. It's such an obvious way to contain these things. But it won't be the last time the Federation did something irredeemably stupid. You've probably heard all this before though. Despite Metroid being this weird paradox where it's stupidly iconic and well-known and has decent sales, yet it seems like no one's actually played them. That's not the case for Super, and Prime 3, probably. Maybe I'm disproving my own point, but what is my point? Well, it feels like everyone's played Super Metroid. It's talked about so much compared to the other games that it's ridiculous. This game was even the speedrun game for a good while. Before your Minecrafts and your Mario 64s, this was one of the games that paved the way for modern speedrunning, to the point where even the speedrunning Wikipedia page talks about it. Like, you know, any percent where you finish the game as fast as you can by any means possible? Yep, Super Metroid. As in, finish the game with any percentage. Not to mention that it and Symphony of the Night essentially popularized a new subgenre. Super Metroid's legacy is insane, and for good reason. It's a damn awesome game. But I didn't always think that. I first played this one on Wii Virtual Console. I think I got it off Club Nintendo for free. Same with the Wii U version. Whoa, being able to buy Super Nintendo games digitally, and like, you own it? Man, good times. Anyway, I played it after trying out the Prime games, and I felt unimpressed. Hell, I felt unimpressed with the Prime trilogy too. The only one I really liked was Prime 3. The other ones felt like some weird, confusing mess, including Super. Man, was I stupid. But that's the weird thing about Metroid for me. The more I play it, the more I appreciate it. Because when I got the Wii U version, I figured I'd try it out again, and I liked it more than I did before. And then I played it a third time where it really clicked with me. And a fourth. And then an eighth time, but with a randomizer. Every time I replay this game, I like it just a little bit more. It's insane. I always learn something new every playthrough. Maybe it's a new pickup I didn't know about, maybe it's a way to beat some enemy, maybe it's a new skip I didn't know about. It always feels like there's something new to experience with this game, and for something that's 27 years old, that's just astounding. I got all this to say about it, and I haven't even booted up the game yet to replay it. Hell, I don't think I even need to replay this game to tell you what I love about it so much. But where's the fun in that? Besides, I need footage. Well, it's time to look at Metroid 3.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
Famous last words. Really though, you know that Sega jingle at the beginning of Genesis Sonic games? That took up more memory than entire levels. Nintendo somehow managed to squeeze in 2 whole sentences. Anyway, Super Metroid starts up with a recap of the first 2 games. Samus defeats Mother Brain, kills all the Metroids except for this infant, all that jazz. After Metroid 2, Samus gave the baby to a galactic research lab so they could, study its energy-producing qualities. We already know how that turned out. They sent a distress signal that Samus responds to, everyone's dead, and Ridley kidnaps the baby. Pissed off, Samus follows him down to Zebes, the planet from the first Metroid. From there, we quickly figure out that your goal is to take down each of the 4 main bosses to open the way to the end, same as the first game. Honestly, Super Metroid almost feels like a reimagining of the original at times. It's pretty similar to Earthbound in that regard. You even run backwards through the end of the first game to show how much time has passed since then. It's really clever. That opening section shows how much time has passed in gameplay too. The controls feel so much better even coming off of Metroid 2. Your jumps feel floaty and slow, but given this is more of a slower, exploration-heavy game, it works. The floatier jumps make vertical sections feel less clunky. I don't have to struggle landing on these small platforms as much. You can aim diagonally this time too, with Eleanor letting you lock to one direction for extra precision. With better aiming alone makes the game feel that much better. There were a ton of times where enemies were hard to hit because I just had to shoot it on an awkward angle. There's very rarely a time where I can't hit my shot anymore, and with this better aiming, you don't even need bombs to progress through this section anymore. You can just shoot downward. Afterwards, you get your basic abilities. While everything feels empty at first, getting the Morph Ball sets off his alarm system, and this early section of Zebes instantly comes to life, with space pirates seemingly appearing out of nowhere, like they were waiting to ambush you, which is a pretty good setup to the main game. It's pretty similar to the first Metroid. You get new abilities to explore new areas, to get even more abilities. But because you have a map that shows you where you've been, half of the issues with these games are instantly fixed. Every time I looked up what I needed to do before, I just needed a shove in the right direction. With the map, I can figure that out by myself. There's these optional map rooms you can find and do that too. They fill out enough of the area to give you a good idea of where you can go, but they still keep enough of it hidden to encourage you to explore and discover all of its secrets. Some of these are stupidly well hidden too, like how the pickups are now marked on the map with a dot, but that doesn't mean there's only one on that square. Like I was trying to get this reserve tank, right? But I missed a shot, and I accidentally found a missile expansion below it. That's always cool to find. And there's the X-ray scope that you can find that reveals all the hidden tiles and stuff, as long as you're willing to slowly scan the area. It's really nice, but I kinda wish the viewing range was a little wider. The X-ray scope isn't Samus' only new toy though. There's a ton of new stuff this time. The Varia suit protects you from heat as well as doubling your defense. Super missiles do way more damage than the standard missiles. Power bombs basically give you a screen nuke. Beams finally stack. And you can even run by holding down a button. Oh, and did I mention that you have full button remapping? In a Super Nintendo game. Why is this such a near universal feature on PC but not consoles? It's stupid. But anyway, that run button can later be upgraded to the speed booster that lets you plow through everything in your path at breakneck speeds, and you can store that speed to pull off a super jump in the form of a shine spark. This thing practically breaks the game in speedrunning. It's glorious. The only new ability that feels kinda useless is the grapple beam. Mainly because if you know how to wall jump decently, which I'll get into in a bit, a good 2/3 of the pickups you can get with it can be collected early. And once you get the space jump, which lets you jump infinitely, it might as well not exist. It just needed more uses than being a grappling hook is all. You know, Metroidvanias have this bad habit of giving you abilities that you only use in one or two places, but that's not the case in Super. When you get a new ability, you use it almost constantly. Super missiles shred bosses. Power bombs are great for clearing out obstacles in rooms. The gravity suit, which lets you move in water without hindering your movement, has practically an entire area for it. You're even immune to certain kinds of lava with both the Varia and gravity suits. Seriously, it makes the weak sauce grapple beam stick out that much more because it actually feels like the only ability that's kinda useless. I'd give second place to Spring Ball though. Not because jumping while Morph Ball is useless. It's great. It's just that they only give it to you once you're like 80% of the way through the game. Combining it with a high jump boost after this was really nice. It has no business being such a late game ability. Honestly, my only big issues with the controls are the default button maps. This is the game's weird ass default controls, and this is the more comfortable layout in my opinion. The game really benefits from back triggers too. I put run and weapon switch on those on Wii U with weapon select on X. Seriously, can Switch SNES Online have button remapping? Please? I can't use ZL and ZR otherwise, and it makes the game control slightly worse for no reason. I can get used to this no problem, but it almost feels like the Super Nintendo just barely had enough buttons for this game. Aside from just exploring and getting stronger, your main objective is to take down each of the 4 main bosses. You just about have to do them in a set order though. That's Kraid, Phantoon, Dragon, then Ridley. But if you're good enough, you can actually do them in reverse order. Yeah, you can beat Ridley before you even get the Varia suit. I wish I was that good at this game. And that's kind of the main thing with Super Metroid. Sequence breaking. After getting the Morph Ball, Bomb, and missiles, you can do just about anything in any order as long as you're good enough to find a way around not needing an ability. Obviously, there was an intended order you're supposed to get new abilities in to progress through the game, but that order is merely a suggestion. Here's the most famous example. To get into the Kraid fight, you need the high jump boots. You you obviously can't jump high enough to get past this ledge, unless you use this new technique called wall jumping. Aside from this one optional portion of the game, they never tell you about this and they don't expect you to use it, but it is quite possibly the most important technique in the entire game. You have to move away from a wall while spinning and then jump to jump off of the wall. It's pretty tricky to do consistently, to the point where I often have to readjust myself whenever I replay the game. This ain't no Mega Man X, you have to get good at this. Although I got the hang of it pretty quickly this time, oddly enough. Using wall jumps essentially means you can scale any vertical wall regardless of abilities, as long as you can pull it off long enough. If you're crafty, you may notice that you can just barely touch this really small wall. So, if you wall jump off of it, you can fight it and defeat Kraid before you get the high jump boots. What's the point of this? Well, in this specific example, there is no point. The high jump boots are only a few rooms away. It's smarter to just get those and immediately run back to fight Kraid to get the variety suit for the hot rooms that are ahead. But that's no fun. In any other game, this would be a design flaw. The game is supposed to be played in a certain way, so you're usually railroaded into getting abilities in a mostly set order. As an example, you can't get the Metal Cab in Mario 64 until Hazy Maze Cave, so you can't get this one star in Jolly Roger Bay until you at least defeat Bowser in the Dark World. But using glitches, that doesn't matter because it's possible to get at the basement without getting a single star. That's seen as a break in the sequence, which isn't intended. But in Super Metroid, it's completely intended. There's no way they didn't know about all the stuff you knew with wall jumping. The attention to detail in this game is so good that Samus' sprite isn't mirrored when she walks left and right. You can even turn abilities on and off individually for no other reason than you can. They wanted you to do this, and it's pretty crazy how much better the game becomes when you actually get decent in wall jumps. You can move faster, there's less backtracking, and the grapple beam is even less useful. Here's another example of how good wall jumping is. To my knowledge, you're supposed to get the ice beam in Norfair with the speed booster, to go back to Brinstar to get the power bombs, to turn around to go back to Norfair to get the grapple beam, so you can get the wave beam. But with a simple wall jump or two, you can get the wave beam before you even get the ice beam. And there's a power bomb pickup right near the grapple beam with a fairly doable but not obvious jump, so you don't have to backtrack to Brinstar. Again, what's even the point of all this? Well, sequence breaking is usually something only used in speedrunning, but I'm not a speedrunner, and I could figure out how to do this stuff by myself. I got myself stuck in Meridia for the 20th time. I don't have encyclopedic knowledge about this game, and I could do this. That's badass and shows just how flexible the progression is. It always feels like you can get better at the game and do things in a different order, which is something I'd rarely see in games. Learning how to sequence break Super Metroid increases replay value tenfold. And keep in mind, you don't actually have to do this. I don't think I knew you could wall jump on my first playthrough, but putting this in and letting you feel like you're breaking the rules of the game is just so much fun to me. It helps make the atmosphere of the game feel less like you alone on an alien planet, and more like that planet is your playground to progress however you please. It's a shame they never kept this design philosophy. I think you can sequence break Zero Mission a little bit through normal gameplay, but that's about it as far as I know. Oftentimes, they got rid of sequence breaks in re-releases of future games, like how scan dashing doesn't work in the Wii version of Prime. And to be fair, something like that was unintentional, but what you can do in Super Metroid was intentional, and I'd love to see another game designed like this. It makes the game more fun to replay, and ends up more non-linear than it already is. Metroid doesn't have to be this giant sequence break fest, though. Future games are still fantastic without this, but there's a certain beauty to this kind of sequence breaking design that really makes me want a modern take on it. Seriously, if they could pull this off in a new game, it would stand out even among modern Metroidvanias. It's been 27 years since then, and I still can't find another game like Super Metroid in this regard. Super Metroid isn't just trumping the previous entries in gameplay either. Let me get more into that atmosphere I mentioned a bit ago. Metroid 1 didn't really have much, and to be fair, it was an NES game. Atmosphere wasn't something video games figured out they could have back then. But with Metroid 2, they definitely tried to give it one, but it was on Game Boy and it didn't work that well. Being in the dark recesses of the planet can only go so far when the game sounds like this. But on Super Nintendo, they finally had the hardware to completely nail it. You start out and there's no enemies and it's all quiet, right? But they do show up and you gain more abilities and more power. You may be alone, but who cares? You're a one-woman army that doesn't need no help. The music gives off this kind of vibe that puts you in the mood for exploring. Whether it be deep caves, sprawling jungles, or a haunted ship, the music almost always sets off the perfect tone for the kind of area it's in. Luckily, we've got some great areas to go with this atmosphere, which is kinda odd to say on paper because it's the same areas from the first game, with some new ones of course. Seriously, you're still going through Brinstar, Torian, and Norfair, but they feel totally different. Before, Brinstar felt like these weird caves, but now it's a sprawling jungle, and the fact that you need the Varia suit to get through most of Norfair now just emphasizes how you're literally running through some volcanic wasteland. Torian is still the endgame linear hallway though, not that it's a bad thing. Criteria is pretty much the beginning overworld where your ship lands, and your ship doubles as both a save point and a health and ammo refill. It's pretty convenient when you happen to make your way here, which will happen. These areas don't have one entrance and exit. They're totally interconnected for the most part. Finding a new way to get into an area you've already been to is awesome. It makes the world feel bigger than what it really is. And it's a big reason why I'm not bothered by the lack of fast travel. Everything is so interconnected to each other, you can get from one side of the world to the other in about 5 minutes at most. It really adds to that adventure atmosphere of the game. But if they added in some kind of fast travel, I wouldn't mind. Honestly, they should just have a system ripped straight from Hollow Knight, where there's a tram station or something that gives you a point in each area they can move between. I feel that would be a good middle ground if there had to be one. The wrecked ship is definitely my favorite new area. It's this destroyed alien spaceship that's filled with really primitive robots and stuff. Too bad we have to use them as floors to speed boost through. They're good boys. They don't deserve being trapped in a pit for all eternity. Although the power in this place doesn't turn on until you beat Phantoon, which is an alien ghost. Yeah, totally not weird or anything. And what does killing a ghost have to do with turning on power? That's not how electricity works. Speaking of Phantoon though, he's weirdly the hardest boss in this game. His attacks are really hard to dodge, and you have a pretty small window to damage him. Even Ridley goes down like a bitch by just spamming missiles. Phantoon means business, and I still feel like I'm gonna lose whenever I fight him. And then there's this weird mole dragon thing. He dies in like 2 seconds and doesn't even give you an ability. What's the point of this dude? You even fight him in easily the worst area in the game, Meridia. Meridia is the underwater section, but you go there right after getting the gravity suit, so it's basically just the same as anywhere else. Although, that's where part of the initial problems show up. There's an entrance in the wrecked ship, and since you got the gravity suit in the wrecked ship, the logical assumption would be to go to Meridia from that end. No, that's too simple. If you go through the ship entrance, you'll end up at these doors that can't be opened. So, how do you open them? By defeating Dragon, which I'm fine with, but there's no indication that's how they open. So if you didn't know about the Brinstar entrance, it's likely you'll get stuck figuring out what to do. The two entrances do link up together, but only through a hidden passage, which is just stupid. If you didn't find that passage, then you gotta turn around and run all the way back to Brinstar for assuming that the water area nearby is where you needed to go next. Like I said, I don't mind the lack of fast travel in this game. The world is usually designed in such a way that going from place to place is never annoying. But Meridia is just annoying enough that I really want to suck it up and get through it. The main thing is this room, just because in order to progress you have to break this single fake block to actually go toward Dragon. Fake blocks are actually something I really like about Metroid. You can look at some blocks and they just look wrong or out of place. And with that paranoia, you shoot it and check it out, a missile expansion, that's cool. You get rewarded for paying attention to your surroundings. But this fake block just looks totally normal, which threw me off. It was also this place filled with falling sand that drags you down. It's a pain in the ass to go through because you have to jump in just the right way. Along with the quicksand on the floor, this stuff only lets you jump when it wants to. This place is just... ugh. And once you get out of the water area and into this freezer place, there's suddenly no longer any major problems. Except for these sand pits that put you into a hidden area for more pickups, but then throw you back into the falling sand room. Because God forbid I actually want to explore a bit. And you have to do this twice because there's 2 sand pits that lead to 2 different rooms. Again. Ugh. Like, why is this one specific portion of the game so annoyingly designed? And the real kicker is how that as soon as you get the space jump, Meridia is no longer annoying. Most of the issues can just be avoided by jumping infinitely. But after you backtrack to the place with the locked doors to get the plasma beam and spring ball, you don't have to come back here, so yeah. Although once you figure out how to navigate Meridia, there isn't much issue with it. This place is just beginner's trap at worst. But Meridia is still the only annoying part of the game. I'm moving on now. While Meridia is the only annoying part of the game, Lower Norfair is the only hard part of the game. There's rising lava that harms you even with both suit upgrades, and the enemies are super tough. I hate these gold pirates that you can only damage when they lower their guard. I can never figure out how to specifically make them do that, and I just take a lot of damage in the process. Lower Norfair is the only place where I died. Super Metroid is pretty easy otherwise. Although I probably made it harder for myself by going the wrong way and fighting Ridley before getting the screw attack. Yeah, I forgot that the left path wasn't just a dead end. But after kicking Ridley's ass, it's finally time to rescue the baby. Oh god, where'd he go? Where'd he go? Well, we beat the 4 main bosses, so guess it's time to beat up Mother Brain again. Oh wait, I forgot about Dragon. Mainly because I don't remember what his fight is actually like. There's a super easy way to cheese the fight by getting grabbed by Dragon and using the grapple beam to shock yourself and insta-killing the boss. It's not something you'll likely figure out by yourself, and it's clearly more memorable than the boss, seeing how I just forgot what fighting him is even like. Anyway, Torian, it's just a standard linear hallway at first, having you kill all the Metroids along the way. Oh yeah, the Space Pirates clone more of these damn things, that's fun. But once you find this enemy that takes 5 super missiles to kill, the tone starts to shift. Everything is dead and turns to ash as soon as you touch it. But then you run into another one of those strong enemies and this giant-ass Metroid just attacks it and kills it like it's nothing. Then it comes after you and leaves you at 1 health before it stops. And you realize that it's the baby Metroid before it flies away. What do they do to him? Luckily, they're not dicks. They don't leave you with 1 HP. Definitely would have been something Metroid 1 would have tried to do. Although, in some sense of divine irony, they put a save point past the point of no return. Why can't the door just open again? There's no reason for this. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in RPGs. You're essentially just soft-locking the player for no reason. At least you can make a save state nowadays instead. But now it's final boss time, except it's literally the same as Metroid 1. It's super easy now that you can aim diagonally. Oh, well, what? Mother Brain's Dino Brain now. Which sets up for this super awesome fight, right? No. This boss fight is a cutscene. Dino Brain shoots a rainbow death ray at you, you almost die, baby Metroid absorbs the laser, gives you your health back, it dies, you have the hyper beam, and easily win. Honestly, I don't like this boss, never have. Look, I love how they're showing you story through gameplay. You feel hopeless until the baby comes in and sacrifices itself to save you. And it even changes color as it loses health like any other boss in the game would do. That's an awesome touch! This kind of storytelling was super ahead of its time and all that jazz. It's just boring on a repeat playthrough. There's no challenge or strategy or anything to make this interesting past storytelling, which usually just makes me want to get it over with and finish the game. I'm pretty sure I died on this boss once, as weird as that sounds, but it's just boring me, alright? It's the same easy fight every time. Afterwards, another escape sequence on a time limit. The planet is exploding, so get back to your ship so you don't die. But between the screw attack and hyper beam, you have plenty of time to make it back. Don't leave just yet, though. Because you remember those animals that taught you how to shine, spark, and wall jump? Save those guys first, don't be a dick. This does absolutely nothing except add a pixel to the ending, but man, does it make me feel good. So if you've ever seen a game done quick and felt some kind of primal fear within you when you see there's been $80,000 donated toward kill the animals, this is what they meant. Afterwards, Zebus explodes, but Samus dramatically makes it out just in time as usual. The end. Fusion review next week. See you all next mission. Oh yeah, that's cool. To the whole 170 of you who have seen a video of mine before, why do I use this for my outro? Because it's cool. And editing it is pretty easy. This little animation always left a good impression on me. The way she just jumps up and shoots the screen before showing your completion percentage was always something I looked forward to seeing. And I love the "see you next mission" phrase that they use in every end screen from now on. It's like, yeah, we know you'll be back for more. So, I figured I could use my favorite game outro for my video outro, and my favorite video game intro for my intro. I'm sure someone was curious. That was Super Metroid. Third time really is the charm, huh? This review was probably a little shorter than I would have liked, but I feel like basically everything's already been said about it. You could release this game as is with extra button maps and 16:9 support, and it would still be fantastic. Considering this game is 27 years old, that's about as timeless as you're gonna get. Obviously, there's a few issues with it. The door transitions can be faster, you really don't need to play the whole power-up jingle every time I get a missile expansion. Seeing doors on the map would be nice, marking pickups I saw but didn't collect would be useful, the lack of fast travel can be a little annoying, and weapon switching is pretty clunky. But you can ignore those small issues and it wouldn't change how incredible the core experience is. Even Meridia's fine when you already know your way around. I was mainly complaining about it because I'm probably an idiot. Super saw all the flaws with the previous entries and didn't just fix them. It polished the flaws and strengths until we had arguably the best game in the genre that the series pioneered. Even energy farming isn't a hassle anymore, seeing as you kill multiple enemies with one shot and only gives you pickups you actually need. Maybe I'm just biased, but I really don't think this game needs a remake. Unlike the first two, I never thought Super Metroid felt outdated in any way. It has aged like a fine wine, not those boxed wines your mom buys. No, the fancy ass stuff. This game is a masterpiece. To the shock of no one. Hell, Super Metroid was so good that I guess they felt intimidated and didn't make another game for 8 years. They even made 2 new games just to make up for that. But this marathon's about 2D Metroid. I will cover the Prime games eventually, but for now, I'm good just talking about Fusion. Following up a huge success is never easy. With video games, they know they can't outdo themselves so quickly, so for a sequel, they usually do something different. Majora's Mask is not Ocarina of Time, Mario Sunshine is not Mario 64, and Metroid Fusion is not Super Metroid. It's the polar opposite. The developers were in a weird but beneficial situation with Fusion. They knew that the fans that wanted the evolution of Super would get that with Prime, which was releasing the same day, so it basically gave them the reins to do whatever the hell they wanted. And that's what I love about Fusion. It knows it can't be Super Metroid, and it's not trying to. Where Super is non-linear, Fusion is linear. Super is easy, Fusion is difficult. Super has basically no story, while Fusion actually has a pretty enjoyable one. But I couldn't have known this when I first played it, because Fusion was my first real Metroid game. Yeah, I'm talking about the 3DS Ambassador program again. And in hindsight, giving away Fusion was probably the wrong move. I think they should have gone with Zero Mission instead. Zero Mission is a bit more standalone than Fusion, and if they wanted to get more people into the series like I actually did with Metroid, Zero Mission is basically the perfect first Metroid game. So if you're looking to get into Metroid, I'd say it's still with Super, Zero Mission, or Prime. Not to say you can't enjoy Fusion as the first Metroid game, I sure as hell did, but there's just something about Fusion completely flipping the series' conventions on its head that you can appreciate more if you know what those conventions are to begin with. Me though, I obviously didn't care. When I first played it, I was surprised at how much I was enjoying Fusion. Man, did I suck at the game though. My first playthrough was like 20-ish hours on the bad in-game timer with tons of deaths. Metroid Fusion is hard, especially for a first-timer, but there was just something about it that felt like I should be doing better. So I kept replaying and replaying it. No joke, I have like 80 hours just playing it off my 3DS, so I must have played this game at least 15 times. This time I finished it in like 4 hours with only 3 deaths, one of which was on purpose. Fusion is easily the most fun game in the series for me to replay, even more so when it's portable. If I knew I had nothing else to do for a few hours, I usually just ran through Fusion again. It's a dope game. Some fans aren't too keen on it, but I don't care, they're missing out. Seriously, if the 11 or so games I like more didn't exist, Metroid Fusion is a game that I could comfortably call my favorite. That's how much I love Metroid 4, and I'm gonna spend the next half hour telling you why. You remember that thing I was saying before about Fusion being the polar opposite of Super? We get that right at the beginning of the game. Instead of this slow build-up of finding out what's happening after the first 2 games, Samus passes out, drifts into an asteroid belt, and almost dies. After another mission, SR-388, Samus runs into this weird bacteria-looking thing. This is an X-parasite. It later hit her central nervous system, and she passes out while her ship launches an escape pod. The Federation rescues her and brings her to their HQ, but during that time, it multiplied within her and infected the rest of her power suit. Because her suit is so used to her, large parts of her suit had to be surgically removed, altering her physical appearance. Although she looks completely normal, so I think by physical appearance they just mean the suit, but they never really specify. Anyway, her odds of survival were minuscule, but within the span of maybe a day at most, someone conveniently figured out a cure. That plot armor is really putting in the work this time. They propose using a cell structure from a Metroid to drive out the X within her. Yeah, the baby Metroid is still around saving your ass even in death. In the game's manual, it reveals that the Metroids were made specifically to combat the X-parasites on SO-388, and apparently some scientists figured this out when trying to save Samus. I've never got this plot point. I could see this happening over the course of years, but day or two? It doesn't really bother me, it's more that the Federation is so incompetent at times and amazes me they could get this done so quickly. But anyway, it works, and now Samus has Metroid DNA in her system, hence Fusion. But because they had to surgically remove parts of her suit, she's stripped of all of her abilities. Out of all the stupid excuses they've come up with for ability loss in these games, an alien parasitic infection is actually a pretty good one. After a quick recovery, the Federation sent Samus to investigate the BSL research station they sent the infected parts of her suit to. But here's where Fusion starts to deviate from the norm. You're usually completely alone, but Samus has an AI on her ship, always giving her her next objective. But hey, she got a free ship out of it. She kinda needed a new one. I've heard plenty of people say this is out of character for her, but I don't think so. A single X almost killed the person who single-handedly saved the galaxy multiple times over. If the X are the thing that caused that explosion, she knows better than anyone that they need to be dealt with. If that means taking Federation orders, so be it. She's not as confident as she was in Super either. She almost died like twice, and now all she has is a standard pea shooter. She's vulnerable. And you can even feel that in gameplay with how much damage you take in this game. The armor on her power suit's been removed, but because of that, she can grab ledges and has faster jumps in general. I don't personally have one preference over the other in controls. Super is a slower paced game than Fusion is, so the floatier jumps work better for that game. Fusion's faster jumps let you dodge attacks and just generally get around quicker. There isn't much wrong with either playstyle, they just work better for the different kind of games they are. In Fusion, you're always given orders. You almost always have an objective marked on the map, and the general layout is given to you at the start of each area, which gives the game a much different feel. It feels less like the usual adventure through uncharted territory and more like a guided bounty mission. It's more artificial, more serious. Fusion's environments feel more artificial too, like how the SR-388 recreation has ventilation shafts and maintenance rooms, the volcano desert area has a boiler room, the water section has a giant aquarium, there's even a sector that's literally just a giant fridge. And it all connects to a central elevator room, which doubles as a way to cut down on backtracking. If this was on an actual planet like Zebes or something, it would feel really forced and unnatural, but Fusion is using the unnatural setting to his advantage. I can totally buy there'd be a room like this for easy travel between areas, because it was intentionally designed to be that way. The research station setting makes the navigation, save, and recharge rooms at the beginning of each area easier to stomach too. Besides, it makes it more convenient to find out your next objective. At first it's usually just go here to get a new ability, but pretty soon they tell you where you have to go without telling you how to get there. You have to figure that part out yourself. It's still a big old go here marker, but it's done in a much more interesting way. Speaking of abilities though, you get them in a much different fashion this time. Before you get them as pickups just like you would a missile expansion or energy tank, but in Fusion, there's two ways to get new abilities. And you do both right off the bat. Your first major objective is to head to a data room to download missiles. Man, 3D printing is getting crazy. And afterwards, you fight a boss to absorb his X-Core to get the Morph Ball. The abilities themselves aren't anything too special, mostly stuff from Super, but because the Game Boy Advance has less buttons to work with, they had to change up the button maps. L and R uses snap to one diagonal direction, up or down, but L now works for both. And instead of cycling through your weapons with a button, you hold R to swap to missiles. This change is just really good. I can swap between my beam and missiles much more comfortably now. It does mean the Super missiles stack with the regular missiles, but that's not a big deal. But seriously though, missiles are really good. At least until we get the wide beam, and then the plasma beam just outclasses missiles most of the time somehow. But because your beams stack, you have ice missiles instead of the ice beam, just in case you don't want to freeze an enemy for some reason. Because you can't turn abilities on and off individually anymore. Not that it's a big deal, but it's kind of a shame. Also unlike Super, is the lack of sequence breaking. Nope, you have to get each ability in a set order and only a set order. You can try hacking the game, but it's actually hard-coded to give you abilities in the order that was intended. Wall jumping was heavily nerfed too. It's still there to help you get around faster, and you might be able to get a few missile expansions early, but that's all it's good for. Still useful, but you won't be scaling walls or anything. The beginning of the game is kind of boring though. You're just running around the upper deck of the station and regaining your basic ass stuff. But things start to get more interesting when you go down the main elevator for the first time. Yeah, that's why the X are dangerous. This is the SAS, a perfect copy of Samus Aran at peak Super Metroid power, except it has no moral compass and seeks only to survive. So here's the thing with the X. You arrive at the station, it's completely deserted, but within the span of a few hours, they overtake everything. Everything in this place is an X parasite. Regular enemies, bosses, even those things attached to boss doors. There's so many of these things, they replace the usual health and ammo pickups. The only living thing that isn't an X in this place is Samus, and the animals that somehow ended up here. Yep, stated plain as day, they are not X-parasites. Anyway, these things make Metroids look like house cats. They perfectly mimic their prey, obtaining all their knowledge and memories in the process, have this hive mind mentality, no threats when they see one, reproduce asexually, and they can't be killed except when they're absorbed by a Metroid. Yeah, the only thing capable of killing these dumbass parasites are the very species we spent an entire game trying to destroy. This is what happens when you mess with the ecosystem. They already got Samus in one of these things. All it's gonna take is a rogue ship to come in for them to move around the entire universe and overtake everything. I really love how they emphasize how much of a threat they are. They quickly learn that Samus is their only predator and they go out of their way to kill her. They also figure out that data rooms are how she gets stronger, so they destroy as many as they can, and because of her new Metroid DNA, she's susceptible to the cold like a Metroid would be. So there's a special blue X that absorbs the cold so that it damages her when she absorbs them. After you get the Voria suit, they still come after you thinking it'll damage her, but as soon as they figure out that doesn't work anymore, they run away from you instead of kamikazing themselves. Little stuff like this make the X feel like a living species, but it's just badass, especially for a Game Boy Advance game. They even try using the boiler room's reactor to blow up the whole station. They see Samus as such a big threat that they're willing to kill themselves if it means they survive elsewhere. The X are probably my favorite example of antagonists that don't speak, because actions can speak louder than words. They have no emotion, no logical reasoning, they only exist to satisfy the most basic desire to survive and reproduce, even if that means wiping out everything in the galaxy but themselves. The X are like bacteria if those bacteria were dittos on the biggest steroids ever, because imagine if you put all those qualities onto Samus. That is the SAS, a singular being whose sole purpose is hunting you, except it's stronger than you. You played through Super Metroid, probably. You know what Samus can do at peak power. You know how much of a threat she can be if she ever snapped one day, which is why it's brilliant that they turned her into a horror movie monster. There's these short sections of the game where you have to face the SAS. The music goes entirely silent, and all you can hear is its footsteps. And keep in mind that these aren't just scripted cutscenes. There's nothing stopping you from just running up to it and getting yourself killed. It's such a genius idea that's executed so well. All you can do most of the time is wait it out and hope it leaves. Oh, and those moments where you have to run away from it, it's the opposite. You no longer feel tense, you feel panicked. You're literally running for your life. I mean, have you seen how much damage it does to you? The X sets a very different atmosphere from the rest of the series. This is a light horror game. Everything in this space station is hell-bent on killing you by any means necessary. It actually reminds me of the first Half-Life now that I'm thinking about it. You're always in danger, and whenever you start to feel safe, it's almost always suddenly taken away from you. Anything can go wrong at any time, and you start to feel it by the end. They trash this station. There's tons of doors completely destroyed. Some leaving the path blocked, others leaving the path open. Holes everywhere. The Arctic sector is even completely melted. It's amazing that this place is still functional. The only comfort you really feel is the standard structure. You're railroaded into doing everything in a set order. You go to a navigation room, get your next objective, get an ability or two, and then move on to the next one. You can't even leave the area until you get this done most of the time either. The game's structure is so much more restrictive than other Metroid games, but it gives you this sense of security. You feel safe in a way. While the game starts to feel samey after a while, you have a comfort in knowing what to do next, and that comfort is stripped away when the power goes out. It's the standard elevator ride that you usually turn your brain off for, but then you have to escape the elevator shaft to get to your ship. Now you have to navigate through the back rooms of the facility and have to fight one of the hardest bosses in the game. You can't go anywhere except the path the game lays out for you, because not even the doors and save rooms work without power. You feel cornered, with no way out except to go through this short section and beat this boss. And this is where you can start to realize that linearity isn't a bad thing, it's just a different thing. A game being too linear is a complaint I've heard plenty of times, not just with Metroid Fusion. But realistically speaking, what's wrong with that? What, going down a fixed, intended path is bad? If you hate that a certain game is too linear, it's probably because it's not implemented right. Like, you know how that with Breath of the Wild is open-ended, and you can go anywhere and do things in any order you want, but it's easy once you get used to it, has very little story, and yet is seen as the best game ever? Or how Ocarina of Time is to go going through areas of mostly linear corridors, but it has a pretty good story and is decently challenging at points, yet it's also considered the best game ever. Basically, the more open-ended you make a game, the harder it is to make it challenging and give it a story that actually feels cohesive. Because it's so open-ended, you have no idea how strong the player is at any given point. Maybe someone will make a beeline for Naboris, but someone else says after clearing out like 75% of the shrines because Thunderlight Ganon is a pain in the ass. Totally not speaking from experience or anything. While we're not running out of time, you know exactly where the player's at when they enter Jabba Jabba's belly, because there's only so much they could have done before that point. It's the same deal with Metroid. Super is easy and it's basically no story because it's one of the most open-ended games of its time. But because Fusion was made to be linear, it was also made to take full advantage of the pros that come with that. Which means that the game's harder. You take more damage than in previous games, but enemies have more defined patterns to dodge. In Metroid, you never really had to try to dodge attacks because you had obscene amounts of health as long as you got most of the energy tanks lying around. And because of that, I never felt the need to learn boss patterns. You're a damage sponge. You don't really need to dodge attacks after a certain point. But in Fusion, the more defined boss patterns and snappier jumps allows me to actually learn enemy patterns so that I don't have to take damage. And the bosses are actually fun to fight too. Arachnus is a really good first boss because it teaches you the fundamentals of fighting bosses in Fusion. You don't have enough health of sponge damage. You have to dodge his basic shockwaves and rolls. And the nearby ledges gives you an easy way to do that. And it's the throwback to the one Metroid 2 boss that wasn't a Metroid, which is pretty cool. Makes sense too, since they have an entire sector based on the planet Metroid 2 takes place on. Zazabi is a fun fight, I think that's how you pronounce it. You have to fire a bunch of missiles up its hole in its body to hit its eye. It just feels good to take down. Two bosses in particular are insanely hard though. God, I hate Ghetto. Or is this thing called Yakuza? I don't know, I think it's both. Alright, imagine fighting the DVD logo, but it also stops to shoot fire at you, and that is the only small window to shoot it with missiles. It's a pain, and in the second phase, you have to hit the same spot where a projectile is coming out of. Ugh, how on earth did I beat this guy so easily this playthrough? And then there's Nightmare lowering the gravity, so you have to use your beam to hit his awkwardly positioned generator thing. And then the gravity's back to normal, but you have to shoot missiles at his face from this ladder while this thing comes at you. If it stops at the right angle, you can get a ton of damage in, but if it stops at the wrong angle, it can be awkward to hit at all. Actually, why the hell is this thing even here? I thought this place was a biological research station. Why do these people have not one, but two bioweapons running around? Bosses have a second phase as well. They're all X-parasites, so you have to take down their core. This is the easy part, but they do give you a new ability afterwards, and it's always fitting. Like how the giant alien armadillo gives you the morph ball, the speed sea serpent dude gives you the speed burst, or how Ghetto uses the space jump in the second phase of his fight. Oh, I love this trope so much. It's so cool to fight a boss and then get one of his abilities. Real quick though, why is the armadillo called Arachnus and the giant spider called Yakuza? That's so weird. Metroid Fusion almost feels like an action game at times, which is by no means a bad thing. Metroid works well as an action game, damn well, and that makes it fun to replay for me. It feels like I can always get better, but in a different way from Super. Before, I could always find out something new, but this time, maybe I can do it faster, take less damage, or maybe I can get less pickups. Okay, I'm not that crazy. I'm a simple man. I see pickup, I pick it up. What kind of heathen just ignores them? Especially now that it doesn't play the full power-up jingle with every pickup you get. Speaking of quality of life though, I love how doors are shown on the map, and you can go into a somersault from a standing jump. It makes activating the space jump less awkward, makes the action feel a little more fluid. But that action feel isn't the only benefit of linearity. Metroid Fusion actually has a story. Not a deep one, sure, but one that I really enjoy.
Spoilers.
Fusion has a lot more dialogue than usual, mainly from Samus's computer, whom she calls Adam, because he reminds her of a CO she used to take orders from. That's one of the cool parts about Fusion. You'll sometimes have Samus monologuing to herself, usually during elevator rides. We don't normally get this much dialogue from her. The only time she's talked before was recapping the story in Super. And at the beginning of the game, she feels vulnerable, not as confident as she used to be. But over time, she starts gaining that confidence back. She averted the boiler explosion, she survived a few SAX encounters, she got the power back on, she even got the space jump and plasma beam back by herself. Hell, the boss following the spider is ironically the easiest boss in the game. You literally just spam missiles and occasionally jump. You know, it's actually kind of cool. They show in gameplay how much more powerful you've gotten and almost instills more confidence in you, the player. I am reading way too deep into a Game Boy game. Anyway, pretty soon after this, you get your ass kicked by Nightmare, you get the gravity suit, and Samus starts ignoring orders. Instead of heading back after defeating Nightmare, she uses her new gravity suit to go through a new part of the Aqua sector and gets the fusion missiles out of it, along with opening up the level 4 security doors. After beating up the security robot, she gets the wave beam to ignore the most obnoxious warning possible.
Warning, no entry without authorization. Warning, no entry without authorization. Warning, no entry without authorization.
You can add voice clips on Game Boy Advance, we get it. Why must Link to the Past Link sound like Oot Link? And did we really need these sound effects in Super Mario World? But hey, there was a clear reason why this place needed so much authorization. Turns out the Federation is making more Metroid clones. No wonder they had a perfect recreation of SO 388. If you go back to Sector 1 after this point, you can even see Metroid shells everywhere. That's an awesome touch. Wait, if you were just gonna clone them anyway, why make Samus kill all of them? Well, luckily the SAX comes in and trashes the place. Good riddance. Adam reassures Samus that the Metroids were for peaceful application only. Yeah, and Prime Trilogy HD is real. Please let me be wrong a second time. But with that Metroid research, they can raise a larva to an Omega within a few days, which made it easy for one of the SAX to smell out his only natural predator. Yeah. 1. The X produce asexually, like bacteria, so there's at least 10 SAX running around now, because things can never be easy. Afterwards, Ridley comes back as an X-Parent. Oh my god, why does that scream have to be so loud? Is that him compensating for how hilariously easy he is in this game? As I was saying, you kick his ass, you get the sewer attack, moving on. Adam tells Samus that we're finally done here and to leave the rest of the Federation, and she goes off on him. Yeah, she actually talks in this game, and it's not weird. I love this. I hate it when protagonists are silent for the sake of being silent. It's always awkward. Samus ain't having any of this. She knows more than anyone how dangerous the X are, and she's not letting them walk away and doom the entire galaxy. I've heard people say that Samus talking is out of character, but this is the most Samus has ever been. I don't get why some people don't like this. Maybe it's why she doesn't talk in Prime 3, because it feels weird in that game. There was a whole room of people having a conversation and she's just not saying anything, when Fusion already proved that she can talk and have it feel natural. But anyway, Samus argues with the militaristic Siri for a little bit about why capturing the deadly alien is a bad idea. Turns out that the Federation has been using this mission as an opportunity to keep Samus' power under control, to which they miserably failed at. They stopped sending support data a while ago, and even went against sending her the plasma beam so she wouldn't try to confront the SAX. Joke's on them, she can't damage it without the wave beam anyway. But she restored most of her abilities on her own, including the diffusion missiles that they accidentally sent, which leads into one of my favorite Easter eggs of all time. In the aquarium part of the Aqua sector, you can use a long series of shine sparks to skip getting the diffusion missiles. It's hard, like really hard. I've tried to do it before, but I didn't even attempt it this time. This skip is the hardest skip in the whole series, and if you can do it, consider it a badge of honor. That is something to be proud of. You will not find this on accident. All this just to avoid using a single diffusion missile. Huh. If you can pull it off, they congratulate you. They even tease the Federation's plan. That's awesome. It really shows how well made the game is that they knew about something as obtuse as this. You still need those diffusion missiles though. But yeah, Samus being trapped in a navigation room while being forced to wait for the Federation to arrive. If she doesn't stop them from coming here, they will absorb the knowledge of the people on the ships, and they will spread across the universe because of it. So Samus has to activate the self-destruct sequence and finally get rid of these bastards. In an attempt to reason with the computer, Samus accidentally calls him Adam, and something almost awakens in him. The computer starts helping her, and basically calls Samus an idiot for thinking this plan will work, because all that'll do is remove the X's only obstacle. Herself. The much better option would be to change the station's orbit to include SO388 in the vaporation field of the blast. So Adam orders Samus to do exactly that. Yeah, Samus' CEO that the computer reminded her of actually is the computer. Turns out that the Galactic Federation occasionally uploads skilled leaders and thinkers into computers as AI. It's really cool, actually. If we ever progress AI to this point, this is something they'd probably do in real life. Like, can you imagine what Albert Einstein or Nikola Tesla could do with today's technology? I think about stuff like this weirdly often. Before Samus can get to the controls, one of the SAX show up, and this time, there's no running. The final boss is yourself. The thing that's been giving you so much shit throughout the whole game is what you have to face right at the end. That's so cool. It's hard, too. I nearly die. Oh my god, what the fuck? Imagine having to fight some messed up alien monster version of yourself. And more importantly, how is this phase easier than the first? You just run back and forth and hit it with your charge beam a few times. Afterwards, you get one last ability, oh, it left. Oh well, let's just blow this place up already. After heading back to the docks, your ship is gone, and there's a Metroid shell on the ground. So now we have to fight an Omega Metroid on a time limit. And it one-shots you. Peaceful application only. But the SAX comes back to fight his natural enemy, not to save you, before getting his ass kicked. That's a really cool take on the getting saved just in the nick of time trope. This thing doesn't care about you. It just sees killing the Omega Metroid is more important than killing Samus. But in absorbing the SAX, you get the Ice Beam, which Samus's body was supposed to reject. Huh. Just one more lie the Federation came up with. The Ice Beam also restores the classic Varia suit colors, which I never liked. It just looks weird on the Fusion suit. The blue and yellow, or purple and cyan, look way cooler. But I'm a weirdo that actually likes the puke green and silver of the Fusion Varia suit, so what do I know? The Omega Metroid is pretty easy, but you have to be careful because you're not only on a time limit, but each attack does a full tank of damage. Trust me, dying on this part is not fun. But after you get the patterns on these bosses down, they're kind of a joke. Afterwards, the BSL goes boom, the X are presumably donezo, and Samus Aran is now a criminal. Yeah, going against the government doesn't usually put you on the good side, but it had to be done. She couldn't just sit there and wait to doom the universe. And it left the series in a weird position. Fusion is the last game in the timeline, so if they make a new game that takes place afterwards, there's a bunch of different ways they could go. The Federation obviously won't be happy about destroying their latest toy, but maybe someone with enough influence actually does understand, and Samus just gets a slap on the wrist. Or maybe they put out an arrest warrant and the next game is running from the law. Or maybe there's a full investigation and we get an Ace Attorney-esque spin-off for the trial. A man can dream. And this kind of speculation went on for nearly 20 years. When Prime 4 was announced, there was a part of me that was disappointed. I want to know what happens next. But luckily, I don't have to wait much longer since Metroid Dread releases this October. They totally went with the Federation hunting down Samus route, which I'm cool with. It's a bit of a shame it took this long to continue the story though, because the story this here is really good. There's lots of intrigue and paranoia. It almost feels like a horror movie at times. Metroid Fusion's story isn't amazing, sure, but it goes to show how much better a game can be with a good story. This isn't just some random station. I'm actually interested in what's happening here. The X are fascinating, and it makes you want to get rid of them. And seeing Samus speak up and talk makes the later parts of the game feel that much more memorable. Like with Portal 2, it just feels satisfying to have a good story in a game you wouldn't expect one from. So, Metroid Fusion. It's kinda really damn good. Like seriously, have you not been listening to me gush over this for the past half hour? This is the same Metroid gameplay as usual, but it's presented in a very different package. That non-linearity and adventure of Metroid is substituted for challenge, tension, and this constant sense of dread. Everything in this place wants you dead, including a soulless clone of yourself. Metroid's insane with this atmosphere, and Fusion has its own flavor of it. There's so many games that try to be different for the sake of it, but Metroid Fusion manages to not only be different from every other game in the series, but in a way that still feels like Metroid. It's more linear, but the core gameplay loop of getting new abilities to get more abilities is still there. They easily could have lost the soul of Metroid and go in the exact opposite direction of what most fans want, but they still remember the bulk of what made the series so good to begin with, which just makes me respect what the designers of Metroid Fusion were trying to do, because they didn't just succeed in doing that, they triumphed. Metroid is a non-linear power trip through an alien world, but Fusion is a challenging mission through a space station, and that's why it's my favorite Metroid game. Metroid Fusion is the antithesis of Metroid, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Handhelds are no strangers to remakes. The Game Boy Advance was no exception. I mean, come on, a good chunk of my early childhood was made up just between Nightmare in Dreamland and Fire Red. While they had this engine made for Fusion, I guess Nintendo decided it was time to breathe new life into the original Metroid by remaking it into Zero Mission. Although a remake can be used a bit loosely in this case. Zero Mission is the rare remake category of the original game is so fundamentally old that we should just throw it out and make a new game entirely. Like seriously, after playing the first Metroid, Zero Mission barely even resembles the original, but that's a good thing. Even if they made a straight remake with an in-game map, it wouldn't be anywhere near the standard put up by Super and Fusion. And seeing how much of a fan favorite Zero Mission is, they made the right decision. Although I haven't actually played Zero Mission much, like twice before this. I remember it being good, but that's about it. It's a great game, but it just never really stuck with me for some reason. Maybe I can try to find out why. Compared to OG Metroid's no story, Zero Mission has these little animated cutscenes to kind of explain the story. Not that there was much to explain. Defeat both main bosses, kill a bunch of stupid jellyfish and a giant brain in a tube. That's mainly it. I don't know, maybe have more of a text-based story intro like the other games have. At least more than, hey all, Samus here, and I'm gonna tell you about my first mission. I like the hand-drawn comic book style they have though. It's pretty cool, especially on GBA. Speaking of that, the Game Boy Advance let them do a lot more with the gameplay. Zero Mission controls nearly identical to Fusion, albeit with a little more refinement. I swear, your jumps are even snappier than before, but I can't quite put my finger on how specifically. Maybe it's the buffed wall jump. This thing was next to useless in Fusion, aside from maybe speeding up the exploration on occasion. But Zero Mission has it closer to how it worked in Super, even if it's not nearly as broken as it was back then. This time is mainly used to get a few pickups earlier, or maybe jumping somewhere easier, but unlike Fusion, you can't grab ledges by default. You first need a new ability called the Power Grip. Samus could do this in Fusion because the Fusion suit was so much lighter, so she needs this ability to do it otherwise. It's been retconned into a pickup that she just happened to never have before. I like that. But after having just played Fusion, not having the Power Grip was throwing me off, I have to admit. Otherwise, Zero Mission doesn't have any new abilities. It's mostly stuff we've seen already. Not that it's a bad thing. All of Samus' toys from later games are awesome to use in the context of the first game. You do get the Power Grip in a new area though. Well, new to this game. You end up in Criteria for a bit and go through some Chozo ruins. It's pretty cool. You can head over to your ship too, but because of how frequent recharge stations are with Chozo statues, you don't have much reason to come back here until way later. The first game was the only one without your ship, so it's pretty cool that they figured out a way to naturally fit it in. But when I say first game, I should reiterate that I mean that loosely. The first cave of the game is nearly identical, but Zero Mission barely even resembles the original past that. Like, you remember the long vertical shafts? I didn't even realize I was in that part of the game until I started to fill out the map. It's long and vertical, sure, but it's otherwise totally different. Mainly because it feels like a cave, and if you fall, you don't have to climb back up because of the newly added floors. Zero Mission is also much better at guiding you to where you need to go next. There's not only these Chozo statues that mark your next objective on the map and recharge your health and ammo, but the game has a much more linear progression. Where the original was really open in how you could progress, Zero Mission railroads you into what abilities you get in what order. Like, yeah, you could get through this place without bombs in Super, but you actually do need bombs now, even with the better aiming. Wow, that's bizarre. I wasn't expecting to prefer something about the original. I loved how you could potentially get every major upgrade before the Kraid fight. Hell, you were supposed to fight Kraid first, but there's nothing stopping you from taking care of Ridley instead. Alright, I just gotta interject something here. I've been enlightened. I was under the impression that Zero Mission doesn't have any major sequence breaks. I was dead wrong. Because where Zero Mission differs from Super in terms of sequence breaking is how easy it is to do. It's incredibly easy in Super, but in Zero Mission it is reserved for the craftiest of players. Mainly from infinite bomb jumps, weird shine spark shenanigans, and other garbage like that I honestly don't know much about. Zero Mission isn't as linear in progression as I thought, which is awesome. Again, I'm not as familiar with Zero Mission as the other games. It's really making me want to replay it and try some of this stuff out. Normally I'd try to naturally fit this new knowledge into the script, but I didn't find out about this stuff until the video was basically done and edited, so I figured this was the most relevant place to bring it up. Anyway, I'm moving on now. But honestly, this was a positive change. It gives you a better indication of where to go next. If you find something you can't reach with your current gear, you try to remember to come back here later after you get the ability you need. And you could obviously do that in the original, but the map makes that feel much more natural. No rooms feel exactly the same anymore, so I can remember where everything is in relation to each other without that map. Because that was a huge issue before. I could look at a room in the original out of context and have no idea where it is in relation to anything else. This is a remake though, so there has to be some semblance to the original, right? Well, yeah. When I found the map room in Brinstar, I immediately recognized the layout from fan-made maps. What's even cooler is that it's almost completely different in level design despite how similar the map layout is. If you play the original, you can still make out a lot of stuff about the original, aside from the obvious, like the morph ball being right next to the store, or your first missile tank being so out in the open. Like, there's these enemies moving back and forth near the top of Brinstar they will probably run into after getting the Vari suit, or how the wave beam is hidden underneath some fake lava in Norfair, or the energy tank fake out in Ridley's lair. It was cool being like, hey, I remember that on NES, where I otherwise wouldn't have even noticed it was a callback to something. But past Brinstar, the areas themselves don't resemble their NES counterparts much. Like, Kraid's lair was this mostly barren area with nothing to do except fight Kraid and find a few pickups. But now it's got all these zip lines to move you around rooms, and these cannons that shoot you out as a shine spark. And that's a big reason why I chose to give Zero Mission his own review instead of talking about both versions at once. Zero Mission is the rare kind of remake where they made a new game based on an old one, which is great seeing as how bare bones OG Metroid is. A good example is how useless missiles felt. Aside from buffing bosses and missile doors, you didn't have a reason to use them when the wave beam did so much damage. You can say the same thing about Fusion actually, the beam in that game is really strong, but missiles do an insane amount of damage compared to a beam in Zero Mission. This is the only game where I frequently found myself being on the lookout for missile drops because of how good they are at dispatching enemies, and you still get super missiles on top of that. We're back to separated regular and super missiles like in Super Metroid, but these things do insane damage, I get it. You can kill Ridley in like 10 supers, these things make mincemeat out of literally everything. Not that you'll have that many supers, but 50 or so regulars is still pretty quick given how fast you can fire them. The new bosses were a fun time though, like this giant eye worm thing that you fight periodically around Brinstar. It's a good way to show you how to hit enemy weak points, and I really like how if you never miss a shot, you can do enough damage to get the charge beam earlier than you're supposed to. There's another worm thing you fight before Kraid. He's pretty easy, but figuring out the pattern of dodging his attack using the zip line is pretty satisfying. Kraid is a far cry from the NES version though, he's more reminiscent of his Super counterpart, later on even requiring you to use his stomach missile things as stepping zones to actually hit him. I ended up having to fight him with a low amount of missiles, and doing this makes the fight way more interesting. It's crazy. Needing to be careful about making sure my shots land was much more engaging than mindlessly spamming missiles like you usually have to for this fight, because if you have a good supply of them, this dude's a pushover. Ridley is about what you'd expect from a post-Super fight, just spam missiles until you win. It's kind of a shame they didn't try to make his fight more interesting like they did with Kraid. A lot of the bosses are pretty straightforward, which I enjoy, but there were a few points that weren't so straightforward. Like these zip lines and Kraid's lair, right? Well, you have to power them on first, but it's hidden behind what feels like 3 or 4 hidden pathways, and it's like, for something that's required, maybe turn it down a notch? Seriously, how was I supposed to notice this single blue block while I was going through the cannon? And in case you didn't see it, yeah, that's the story of how I spent 10 minutes running in circles. For this part, we're going to destroy the top of this tunnel to get the Varia suit. I just didn't realize you could destroy it. Or when you have to fight this caterpillar thing. What you have to do is hit it with your beam to make it move, and then defy the laws of reality by planting bombs that it crawls through. Like, I've never been in a situation where you have to plant bombs over top of something. I didn't know they worked like that. For something so simple, it's an oddly mind-bending puzzle. This is the worst one though. When you go into Ridley's lair, you have to immediately leave because the bug thing you just killed made a hole that you can go through to fight the now hatched bug to get super missiles. Like seriously, they really should have conveyed that you were supposed to leave. I just got into a new area, why would I want to immediately exit? For a remake of a game that was so cryptic, I was surprised how often I got stuck trying to figure out what to do next. You'd think they would put extra attention to make sure the player was never confused like they were originally. Now, on a repeat playthrough, this stuff is easy to remember because of how obtuse they are, but during the first playthrough I did for this review, I just forgot about it, I guess. I never found myself replaying Zero Mission that much for whatever reason. Never felt like it, I suppose. Due to a combination of finishing up the Metroid 1 and 2 reviews, learning more programming stuff, and getting a PS5 through some divine miracle, I ended up not buckling down and writing this script until 2 weeks after I initially played it. I wasn't sure what to really say, so I just said screw it and played the game again. And I'm glad I did. Zero Mission is oddly replayable. Everything feels so smooth when you know what you're doing, and that makes it have Sonic Syndrome in that regard. It's not always the best at first, but super satisfying and fast-paced when you put in the time to get better at it. I always saw Zero Mission as one of the weaker games because of pacing issues and feeling a little too short, but I guess that was just me. If I'm still able to have this much fun after just having replayed it, that's a sign of a damn good game in my eyes. And it's even shorter when you know what you're doing. I shaved off an hour from what I usually take. But there's still the occasional excessive backtracking that I have issue with. Like, you have to get the high jump down in Norfair, then go back to Brinstar just to make an instant U-turn back to the exact same spot you were just at in Norfair. It's not annoying per se, but they really couldn't have made it less cumbersome. This isn't like Super, where the world is laid out in such a way that backtracking is never annoying, or like Fusion, where every area is connected in a central hub. Running back and forth between the same places is just unnecessary. It would have been a great place to introduce some kind of fast travel so you can cut down on this stuff, even if it doesn't happen very often. But hey, you beat Ridley, you got a bunch of new abilities, and it's finally time to head down to Torian and kill Mother Brain again. It's the same stuff as always, freeze Metroid, missile spam to kill Metroid. But at least there's no point of no return, so you can take advantage of the generous amount of save rooms. Seriously, run into one of these like every 5 seconds. It almost feels excessive. But hey, at least they have a room to easily restock on missiles right before Mother Brain. That's nice. Just like everything else, she's still mostly the same, at least until the end. You have to time your shots to when she opens her eye and dodge the shockwave instead of just mindlessly spamming missiles. I like that. It adds a little more skill to an otherwise boring boss. But doing that caused the base to explode, so we run away again. But there's a short section where you have to get back to your ship instead of just the elevator. Neat. This is where the original ends, but Zero Mission isn't done yet. Space pirates actually decide to pursue Samus for once, and her ship crash lands in a new area called Chozodia. And from there, you have to proceed without your power suit. I'm not sure what the general consensus is on the Zero Suit section, but I personally really like it. All you have is this dinky stun gun, and you have to sneak around space pirates in a stealth section. The music is really cool too, it really puts you in a stealth mood. Oh, never mind. For some reason, this unique song that only plays once ends the first time you get caught, with the remix of Super Space Pirate theme. And the alert music is also a remix of the Space Pirate theme. It's a weird decision that kinda ruins the vibe of this section. It doesn't feel like stealth anymore, it feels like you anxiously avoiding enemies long enough to get to the next save point. Otherwise, it's a pretty short level where you make your way to the nearby Chozo ruins to get your suit back. The stealth mechanics are pretty simple, and by the time it starts to overstay its welcome, it's over. Actually doing well in this part feels good though. I practically feel like I'm in a spy movie when I get through the laser section undetected. But trust me, these doors that only open when you're undetected are annoying. Like one time I was right at the end, but because these stupid pirates wouldn't leave me alone, I died. That was a pain. You fight a boss too. It's a cool change of pace, even if it just amounts to shoot the mirror whenever the reflection's gone. But I guess beating it is some Chozo rite of passage, because you not only get your suit back, but Samus also gets her weird ass shoulder pads that we all know and love. Yeah, she didn't have them in the first game because she hadn't earned them yet. Throughout the game, you got these weird power-ups that were incompatible with your current suit and didn't seem to do anything except let you destroy these weird blocks with symbols on them. So along with getting your suit back, you also get the plasma beam, gravity suit, and space jump all at once. The first time I played the game, I was really weirded out that I got the screw attack before any of this stuff. You felt like you were missing a few abilities by the end of the game, but they more than compensate you. From there, they make you feel invincible. All those pirates that you had to tiptoe around, yeah, you can just one-shot them now. They pose no threat whatsoever. Except maybe those stronger black ones, those guys are annoying. But you know what, here, I have a bunch of Super Missile expansions. All while this triumphant remix of Samus' theme plays. Yeah, it, maybe plays a little too much. Seriously, it stops feeling awesome after you've listened to this for like 40 minutes straight. This stupid song starts to get annoying like that one song on the radio they keep playing every hour for some reason. There is an entire soundtrack here. Did you really have to pick Brinstar again? It feels more like an event theme and less like an area theme. Like, if you've ever played Mega Man Battle Network or Star Force, there's this distress theme that plays whenever someone's in danger or whatever. It's not usually annoying until you get near the end of the game and it's playing non-stop. This is like that. Just play something else, please. They really should have had a unique theme for Chozodia after you get the power bombs. It would have made this place feel less tacked on. Speaking of those, I love the build-up power bombs have. You see it all the way back in the ruins in the Zero Suit section, and it's just barely out of reach right before we can actually get it. And once you do get it, you're surrounded so you can go boom. Yeah, eat it. Free Photoshop can't help you now. Finally, you have all of your abilities. It feels so underwhelming. Like, seriously, there is nothing to do anymore other than fight the final boss. Yeah, you can break the tube outside the mothership to get back to the main game, but why even do that? Going back is a pain in the ass anyway and incredibly well hidden. I didn't even know you could leave until I looked up how. And keep in mind that the guy on GameFAQs worded this as, how do I escape from Chozodia? You need to go through like 2 hidden paths just to get out of this place. It's absurd. This stupid area feels way more disconnected than it should be. This doesn't feel like a new area, it feels like a level completely isolated from the rest of the game. The only big issue with Zero Mission is how meaningless the endgame feels. What's the point in getting more pickups when I know they won't help? I only need like 5 super missiles for the last boss, and all power bombs will get me is more power bombs. Not to mention that exploring Chozodia just feels tedious. I don't know what it is, this place just feels confusing to navigate, and those doors that only open when you're undetected still work, which just bogs down the pacing. These space pirates won't leave you alone either. I mean, for God's sakes, these guys follow you into save rooms. Like, give a girl some privacy, man. It doesn't matter what I try to do at this point. Exploring is annoying, pickups feel useless, and my ears never want to hear this music ever again. The only half-decent thing left to do is finish the game, which honestly isn't much better. The last boss is just chilling past the bridge of the ship with not much resistance to get to him. And once you do fight him, he's not only a robot Ridley, he also goes down in like 20 seconds. The guards to the escape pod put up a better fight than this guy. That's just sad. For how good this game is, it's a shame how much of a low note it ends on. Don't let the poor endgame put you off. Zero Mission is fantastic. It takes the outer shell of the original Metroid and pretties it up into something completely original in its own right. That's not an easy thing to do, and Zero Mission pulls it off beautifully. And who even cares if it ends up being so different from the original? You unlock the original Metroid after you beat the game, so you can just go back to playing that if you somehow didn't vibe with the remake. Seriously, more remakes need this. Being able to go back and easily play the original makes you appreciate all the new improvements. The only other game I can think of that does this is Halo, but those remakes are pretty much just prettier versions of the source material anyway. I'll give Samus Returns a pass since Metroid 2 was already playable on 3DS, but Link's Awakening really should have included an emulated version of the original. Playing the first release still has some merit. But let's face it, Zero Mission just replaces the first Metroid, don't bother with the NES version. The difference isn't just night and day, it's practically a ghetto motel room versus a 5-star resort. If you're interested in playing Metroid, this is probably the best place to start. After Zero Mission release, 2D Metroid basically died. Handhelds were the most obvious place to release 2D entries, but we instead got Prime Hunters, which somehow managed to be an FPS on DS. So if you prefer the 2D entries over the 3D ones like I do, you didn't really have much. Well, I say that, but we got the Prime Trilogy during this time, so it was pretty hard to complain. Metroid fans were eating good from 2002 until 2009, because in 2010, Metroid Other M released, which is indeed a video game. But I'm not here today to make fun of Other M. People didn't like it, it got bad reviews, so Nintendo just gotta pull the plug on the whole series, leading to a second Dark Age of Metroid. And this one was arguably worse because at least during the first big release gap, the only really good game was Super, but now we had a whole series of awesome times. When you know that a series you love clearly works and has at least moderate demand, it hurts when they just pretend it doesn't exist. I couldn't have truly known this pain at least. By the time another Metroid game came out, I was already a fan for years and I got into it midway through the hiatus. Luckily, if you wanted more of that Metroidvania gameplay, there was hardly a shortage of stuff to play. Cave Story, Axiom Verge, Guacamelee, there was probably a good DS Castlevania in there. Terraria kinda counts, freaking Hollow Knight, but it's not quite the same, you know? Those generic off-brand Oreos can only satisfy you for so long. Eventually, you need the real thing. And eventually, we would get a new Metroid game on 3DS. Metroid Prime Federation Force. And then we got Samus Returns a year later. Like, seriously, why does this game exist? It's some weird co-op shooter that literally no one was asking for. Yeah, it was well made, but most people just ignored it out of spite. It's not what we wanted. It would be like trying to revive The Legend of Dragoon with something akin to Panzer Dragoon. Like, what? E3 2017 almost felt like an apology for Federation Force. Boom, Prime 4. Boom, Metroid 2 Remake. Your grandkids are gonna love that first one. And Samus Returns was coming out in a few months? Hell yeah, sign me up. I was starving for anything new. I was so excited for it that I probably would have reviewed the game back when it came out if I could record 3DS games at the time.
But there will be 4 campaigns Shovel Knight. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Oh my god. Half-Life 3 confirmed.
Honestly, that's probably a blessing in disguise. A lot of other people seem pumped too, like, people were really excited for this. Why did no one buy this game? I get that the Switch was a few months old at that point, but it boggles my mind that Samus Returns sold as poorly as it did. We had people begging for a new game for years, and we finally got one, and it seems like no one played it. But hey, I did, and it was pretty awesome. But I replayed it about 2 years later, and I liked it considerably less. Design-wise, there were a lot of things I just didn't like after that hype of a new game wore off. Although I did play it after binging a bunch of other Metroid games, so maybe I was just getting burnt out from them. You could say the same thing about what I'm doing now, but I've been working on these since like February, and it's late August when I'm writing this, and late September when I'm recording this. So I've spaced them out much better than the last time I've played all these games. But maybe I'll enjoy myself a lot more if I take my time and play it at a more leisurely pace. Only one way to find out. Although Samus Returns is a 3DS game, and 3DS capture cards are virtually non-existent now, so I played through Samus Returns on an emulator. If you notice some slowdown, that's on me. On real hardware, Samus Returns plays at a pretty much locked 30 FPS. Citra doesn't seem to like AMD GPUs for some reason. And for some other reason, despite the fact that the game runs at 30 FPS, recording at 30 FPS was really choppy, and the only way to fix it was to ironically record at 60. Look, my point is, the footage isn't perfect, but it's the best I could do. Anyway, no more stalling. Samus Returns. I already went over this story in my Metroid 2 review. Everyone was sick of these stupid Metroids, so Samus has to murder all of them. Anyway, Samus Returns plays pretty similarly to Fusion. The jumps feel less snappy, but that's the only big difference. But unlike the original, you don't start off with a morph ball, even if you do get it pretty early. You can also aim in any direction with L now, instead of just diagonally. You can't move while doing this though, which isn't as big of a deal as it sounds. You move with the analog stick now, so moving and shooting diagonally isn't nearly as awkward to do. On paper, playing a 2D side-scroller with a stick sounds stupid. But with the 3DS's circle pad, it's fine. And besides, Metroid rarely makes you do any precise platforming, so you won't really notice it. The best new addition to the controls is the morph ball shortcut though. You've always had to press down when you're crouching, but now you can do it instantly. One problem, you activate it by touching the map on the touchscreen. It's so stupid and awkward that I forgot about it when I played it on the actual system, because having to move your hand and then quickly move it back to the circle pad is unintuitive. You use the touchscreen to switch weapons too, but it's not as bad because your other thumb can still let you move. But it's annoying, especially later in the game when you have to quickly switch to the grapple beam to stun certain Metroids. I get that the 3DS ran out of buttons, but on new 3DS, CL and ZR don't do anything. Why couldn't you just use those? It would have made things way less awkward. But luckily, we have technology. Citra lets you assign touchscreen coordinates to buttons, which means I can play Samus Returns like a normal video game, and this morph ball button is instantly amazing. Being able to easily ball right at the height of your jump gives you so much more precision. It's insane and I love it. Assigning the buttons to the right analog stick like Metroid Prime helped out too. I kinda wish the controls could be this smooth on 3DS because I don't want to go back, man. The morph ball button is too much fun. But beams stack now, so why do we need a weapon switcher? Well, they made the very perplexing decision to make the ice beam a separate weapon. And they didn't just nerf this thing, it's practically useless now. You can freeze enemies to use as platforms, but they stay frozen for barely any time unless you charge it. There was a point where I stopped using it entirely because I forgot I even had it. There's no point in using this thing, which is bizarre because the grapple beam isn't useless anymore. It can be used to quickly pull yourself toward grapple points or break these blocks. It gets a lot of use now, which just makes me question how they could do the ice beam so dirty. But despite being a remake, Samus Returns actually has a few brand new abilities. The main one being the melee counter. If you see this flash on an enemy, you can stun it with a counterattack. It's fine as a mechanic, but needing to stop to do it slows down the combat a bit too much. Until you get the sure attack, there's a few common enemies you stop to counter when you could just shoot through them in any other game. It works much better for bosses. The counter keeps you on your toes for an opening to do big damage. It's just the regular enemies where it usually feels unnecessary. Aside from that, you also have these new Aeon abilities. You select them with the D-pad, then press A to activate it, which uses the new Aeon meter that you can find expansions for. The first one is the Scan Pulse, and it might just be the most broken ability in the series. This isn't Prime Scan Visor. This thing reveals the nearby map and reveals fake blocks in the same area. The issue with this thing is that it tells you too much information. I 100% of this game twice because honestly, when the game straight up tells you where everything is, you might as well. I think a big reason behind revealing fake blocks is that these things are practically unnoticeable on the 3DS screen. Looking for inconsistencies in sprite art is much easier to do than 3D models. I feel that they transitioned the 2D art style to 3D pretty well, but fake blocks are too hard to see. Unless you're playing the game in HD, because it turns out that seeing small inconsistencies is significantly easier when you're playing in 960p as opposed to 240p. Let me illustrate that visually. This video is
1080p,
but this blue rectangle is the 3DS's resolution. Yeah, you can't make out small details in such a small screen space. Not to mention you might be playing on the original model, which made minute details even smaller. It worked with pixel art because the art was small to begin with. It doesn't work as well with 3D models because you need the proper resolution and texture to see it as intended. Anyway, long story short, I get the intention behind the Scan Pulse, but it kinda ruins the exploration and discovery of Metroid. Again, why bother exploring when you can press a button that tells you everything? I tried my best not to use it this time, but this thing is too damn good. It's hard not to. The other abilities are much less game-breaking though. Lightning Armor makes you invincible and increases the power of your melee counter. Beam Burst makes your beam super rapid fire, and Phase Shift slows down time for everything except you. The armor is the most useful one for me. It essentially increases your health by a few hits during bosses. Beam Burst sounds useful, but it drains your Aeon too much to use consistently, aside from enemies that can only be damaged by Burst. Besides, missiles are pretty good in this game, so you'll likely use those a lot until you get the Plasma Beam. Phase Shift is mostly useless though. It's mainly used for puzzles and getting pickups. But you know, the more I talk about this game, the more you can tell the developers were massive Fusion fanboys. Samus Returns was developed by Mercury Steam, bringing us such classics as Castlevania Lords of Shadow and American McGee Presents Scrapland. Okay, what the hell even is that? Wait, this is a game about investigating robot murders? And it's getting a remaster? I was just gonna mention this as a joke, but this actually sounds kinda cool. Anyway, these guys were mostly in charge because they pitched a new Metroid game for Wii U, which Nintendo said no to, and then they pitched a remake of Metroid Fusion, to which they said no again. But Yoshio Sakamoto was so impressed, he was like, why don't we make Metroid 2 instead? The rest is pretty obvious. Samus Returns takes a lot of cues from Fusion. The more linear nature of Metroid 2 made it perfect to turn into more of an action game. You take more damage than usual, bosses have more defined patterns to dodge, and the game gets pretty challenging at times. But the game has a checkpoint system now, so when you do die, you don't usually lose any real progress. Bosses feel like more of an event, too. There's more dynamic camera angles and shots, melee counters that give you a big opening to attack, and sometimes the grapple beam gives you a chance to stun them. And doing that feels super satisfying. You can almost feel Samus just yanking that dude to the ground. It took me a while to get to the bosses. The main ones are Metroids, just like before, and they're easy, just like before, but you at least have to hit the bottom of them now, not just anywhere. Each Metroid even looks slightly different from the other ones. That's a great touch. It kinda reminds me of Spyro Reignited, making all the dragons unique. Gammas are probably the most annoying though, mainly because a lot of them can run away and move to another room and you have to track them down. It's not hard going to another arena, it's just annoying. Like seriously, can you just die? Please. This is where the melee counter was really fun to use. It feels good landing one, and those cutscenes to play while you mash the fire button just makes you feel like a badass. Almost all the fights are totally revamped too. Zetas and Omegas feel like real boss fights now, and they're more than just missile sponges. And finding Metroids is so much easier. You start to hear a beeping sound when you're near one, which I really liked. It builds tension when you find one, and it's just useful in general. But the brand new sections and bosses are where Samus Returns really shines. Like, the last normal area on Game Boy was mostly empty with 3 Omegas and nothing else, but now it's this abandoned Chozo lab. There was something atmospheric about there being nothing but these fights, but this new area is more interesting overall. These guys feel like escaped lab experiments instead of hyper-resilient killing machines, but I'll take it if the trip to fighting them is better. There's also this one part with this giant mining robot chasing through this hallway, and it feels like it's from a completely different game, in a good way. It uses your abilities pretty well, and it's a fun test of reflexes. And you fight this dude later, and it's like the hardest, most elaborate boss in the game. It's got multiple phases, and you have to figure out how to fight it, and this fight's great. This kind of stuff gives me hope that Metroid Dread is awesome, because these guys really know what they're doing when they aren't held back to the confines of a remake. I mean, come on, these guys are more than qualified from this scene alone. However, you can still tell this is a remake. Samus Returns still has a lot of issues that the original did. The areas are really samey for one. They do have different themes to them, but many of them still have that giant temple in the center structure, and I didn't immediately notice a lot of similar landmarks to the Game Boy version, like I did in Zero Mission. It could be down to the more zoomed out camera or shift in art style or something, but there weren't very many parts that made me remember stuff from Metroid 2. The areas really could have used unique names as well. I don't know what place is what, because a number is harder to remember than criteria or something. Ultimately, it still feels like you're going through the motions most of the time. Find all the Metroids, kill them, dump their DNA into a gate to lower their purple lava. Okay, I do like that. That lowered lava wasn't immediately obvious before. Now you see it happen, so you know what clearing out all the Metroids do. And I love how they made the lava purple like it was on Super Game Boy. I like what they did with the music too. The original game only really had bleeps and bloops for the most part, but its soundtrack actually sounds like music now. That's a compliment, I swear. Those weird noises that they use for atmosphere on Game Boy has been translated really well here. I wasn't expecting that. My only real gripe with the music is how I can barely remember any of it. They definitely nailed that Metroid ambience, but didn't get the melody right. I love how they're with most Metroid tracks, and you tune them out and let them set the area's mood, but they're still good to listen to when you do pay attention to them. Not here. I can't remember most of them aside from the main theme that only plays once now. Maybe like one song near the end of the game, but that's it. I get that the original didn't have much to work with, but it feels like they could have done better. They also could have done better with the endgame, because once you get all your abilities, the completionist cleanup is a massive chore. The new teleport stations make backtracking much easier, but Metroid 2 is so linear that you never had to backtrack to previous areas. So this is the only time you're really using them. What you would normally do is get most of this stuff as you pass through places you've been before to get to new places, but because you've never been back to previous areas normally, you gotta do all that at once. It took me like 2 hours. And the extra pickups do help, but there's a lot of puzzles involved. It kind of feels like too much at times. Like maybe you're doing these big multi-room puzzles just to get one missile tank, and it's like, can you tone it down a little? The worst part is when you have to do this new thing called a spider boost. Or is it a power bomb cannon? I don't know. It would help if they actually told you about it in-game. And yeah, they don't directly tell you about shine sparking or wall jumping in Super Metroid, but at least there were those optional animal sections that taught you how to do it. In Samus Returns, there's nothing, not even the manual. Basically, you just use a power bomb while you spider ball to a wall, so it's easy to do. You just wouldn't think to do it, which makes a few pickups feel impossible to get because you didn't know you could do this. There's no speed booster in this game, so I didn't understand how to get this stuff my first time playing. Going back to previous areas highlights the low enemy variety too. In the final area, you're still fighting the same enemies from the beginning of the game, but now they're stronger. Sure, it was like that on Game Boy, but that was Game Boy. You really couldn't come up with more enemies to fight throughout the game? It probably would have helped with the repetitious structure that they couldn't really change that much. Sometimes, though, they changed too much, mainly in the final area. There's so many enemies in this place that it gives the polar opposite vibe that Game Boy had. Before, you were so deep in the planet that Metroids were the only things resilient enough to survive down here. Now it's this action-packed fight to the Queen, and it feels like something was horribly lost in translation. Even after you kill the Metroid Queen and befriend the baby, it's no longer this tranquil walk back to your ship. Because the baby Metroid could eat these rock things, right? Well, this is essentially a new ability, and using it is required to get a few pickups. Seriously, you beat what was originally the final boss, and you're still going around getting more pickups. There's too many pickups in this game. I'm tired of collecting this stuff. Please calm down. But that new Metroid Queen fight is kind of awesome. Before, it was super simple. You shoot missiles up its mouth and bomb the insides. You still do that, but there's way more attacks to dodge, and figuring out how to avoid them is really fun. Like, it blows wind at you, so you avoid it by spider-balling to the ground. That's so cool. It's not something you immediately expect to do, but it's so obvious when you realize. And you land the finishing blow by power-bombing the insides. Man, does this fight kick ass. The new final boss, not so much. Because you go back to your ship, and everything looks dark and ominous instead of tranquil, and Ridley shows up out of nowhere. Metroid 2 was the only game without Ridley, so it was cool at first, but the more I think about it, he doesn't have much reason to be here. He could have found out about Samus' mission, sure, but why even bother coming here when he can just kidnap the baby later when it's less guarded? Whatever. He's actually kind of hard unlike most of his fights, but it's otherwise a fairly standard boss that really didn't need to be here. I would have preferred if he was a boss somewhere else in the game and not just right at the end, because as far as I know, you can only damage him with the beam, so by the off chance you save the final cleanup for the very end, it's pointless. Why get more missiles when I can't really use them anymore? I've never really felt like 100%ing Metroid games because I know I don't need the extras. But hey, if you want to make the final boss even easier, that's your choice. But in Samus Returns, it borders on pointless aside from energy and Aeon tanks. Seriously, why should I waste my time getting the rest of the missile tanks when the final boss can't be hit with missiles? But anyway, the game ends the same way otherwise. Samus brings the baby to the Federation, the last Metroid is in captivity, the galaxy is at peace, all that garbage. But the end screen doesn't show your completion percentage, which is so weird to me. You can view it from the main menu, sure, but it just feels so empty without it. Oh dude, there's a post-credit scene showing the X-Parasites coming out of hiding. I love that. Remember, don't mess with the ecosystem. Samus Returns has more difficulties too. Zero Mission had a horde mode, but I just didn't mention it. And I wouldn't really mention it here either, but there was also fusion mode, an even harder difficulty that plays with a fusion suit. It's really hard from what I hear, with some later bosses even killing you in 3 or 4 hits. It's a nice addition with one glaring flaw. You need an amiibo for it. That is very hard to find. Amiibo spoofing is pretty easy nowadays, luckily, but hiding a cool new difficulty behind a figure that scalpers buy up before you really have a chance to get one is beyond stupid. They're still doing this too. It's infuriating. At least give us the option to pay $3 instead or something. You know, assuming it's not a quality of life improvement that should be in the base game to begin with. But I'll get to Zelda one day. Overall, though, Samus Returns is not a very faithful remake. Whether or not you like that would be preference, really. It's better than the original, that's for sure, but I don't know. Samus Returns feels like one of those games that could just be better. The new content is awesome, and it made plenty of good improvements to the controls, but it goes a little overboard near the end. The actiony feel doesn't really fit Metroid 2 as much as Fusion, which you can tell was a big inspiration for them, because in a vacuum, Samus Returns is amazing. But when you see it's a remake and it takes away some of the nuance in the source material, and it's just pretty standard when you compare it to most of the other games in the series, Samus Returns is just that for me, a standard Metroid game. You'll have a blast if you've never played one before, but feel mostly over by the end if you've played just about every game in the series, because that's the weird thing about Metroid for me. The more I play it, the more I appreciate it, but not Samus Returns. I played Zero Mission twice in a short amount of time and had a blast on both occasions, and after learning about all the sequence-breaking stuff from it, I was tempted to play it again. If I replayed Samus Returns again right now, I'd probably be sick of it halfway through. I can have my fun with it, but not very often. It's almost too much. Still, a standard Metroid game is pretty great, and that's enough to satisfy me. But hey, if a slightly botched Metroid 2 remake means we get an amazing Metroid 5, I can easily accept that. And if it can't, well, next time we're looking at another Metroid 2 remake. Metroid's future may be looking pretty damn good right now, but let's rewind a bit. Back to 2016. A mere 5 years ago, Metroid fans had nothing to play aside from Federation Force, but honestly, does that really count? And yeah, I said this stuff already, but I left out one very important detail. Around the time of Metroid's 30th anniversary, which Nintendo was completely ignoring and out of pretty much nowhere, came one of the highest rated fan games of all time. Another Metroid 2 remake was made by mostly one guy in his free time over the course of 10 years, and you can kinda tell it took that long to make. Like, you have to understand that around this time, there was nothing for this series. We had no way of knowing that a year later we would get confirmation of not one, but 2 new Metroid games. As far as we knew, this one guy, Milton Gosti, aka Dr. M64, seemed to care more about Metroid than Nintendo did. And as more of an insult, AM2R got a DMCA takedown a day after it released, which in hindsight is one of the few times where this kind of thing made sense. I had heard of AM2R before it came out, but I didn't expect much from it, let alone actually seeing it finished. Because apparently it was pretty common to try and remake Metroid 2 back in the day, hence another Metroid 2 remake. But this is the only one that was actually finished, aside from the official one. And that gives the name a completely new meaning. Before, it was like, yeah, I'm alluding to what other people are doing in a meta-humor sort of way, to now being an alternative to the official game, which made tons of people compare the two remakes, and why wouldn't they? We had 2 different groups of people remaking the same game around the same time and ending up with 2 vastly different results. Due to the way copyright law currently works, this may never happen again. But I chose to just ignore AM2R for my Samus Returns review. I don't see any issue comparing official releases to fan projects, but I wanted to judge Samus Returns for what it is. I'm sure someone on the development team knew AM2R existed, but I heavily doubt it had any real influence on the project. So when talking about fan projects, there are no rules for me. If I'm like, oh, SR did this thing better, or I like this thing about AM2R more, then sure, why not? After all, AM2R is in my top 5 favorite Metroid games, so why not compare it to the official games now that I'm finally talking about it? I only finished the game once, so I was really looking forward to jumping back into it. And I haven't touched the game at all since the new stuff that was added, so I'm curious about what was changed and improved. Right, I should probably mention that. I was actually able to download the game from the official website the day it came out. That was 1.0. But there was another release 12 days later that I think rebalanced a few things and fixed some bugs. That was 1.1 and where it officially ended. I remember thinking some of the later fights were too hard and I stopped playing because of it. But I wasn't aware that 1.1 existed at the time, so when I replayed it in like 2019, I didn't have any trouble with those fights. So I'm assuming it fixed it? I don't know. Anyway, unbeknownst to me again, in 2018, a group of fans with no involvement with the original game were able to reverse engineer the source code, and from there, mod AM2R and implement cut content like a new game plus and add completely new stuff, like an item randomizer and a fusion mode, like in Samus Returns. They even added more quality of life stuff, like widescreen support and Linux and Android ports. And these updates are open source now, so they're unlikely to be lost in the future. Wait, if AM2R got C&D'd, how are these fan updates legal? Alright, well, I'm not a lawyer, but to my understanding, Nintendo C&D'd Milton Gosti. So if a completely different group of people continue the project and Milton is not involved in any way, shape, or form, it's completely legal. Just like how modding PC games is usually legal. And that's beautiful. Remember folks, corporations are not your friends, because if they were, a game like another Metroid 2 remake would be allowed to legally exist. This game really is that good. Okay, look, this is the 3rd time I'm talking about Metroid 2's story. Too long, didn't read.
Kill every last one of them!
Although AM2R actually had the same idea as Samus Returns. Use a text-based story intro like the other games did. The game also automatically scans areas and bosses, giving you data entries to read. It's a nice touch and helps flesh out the world a bit. This place doesn't seem like some random cave structure anymore. There's actual facilities and presence here. It's of course all abandoned, but it's a lot more interesting than Subterranean Biome number 3. Because AM2R's main goal is to expand on the original Game Boy game and make it more interesting, while also remaining as faithful as possible to the original design. I was struggling to find things that felt familiar in Samus Returns, but almost everything about AM2R reminded me of Metroid 2. Even the music that was mostly bleeps and bloops has been subtly ingrained into the new soundtrack. And can we just talk about how good the soundtrack is? Each area has its own theme now, and even the original tracks sound like official Metroid music. And it's all just so damn catchy. I especially like how the main theme gets a variant as it goes deeper into the planet. Out of all the versions of Metroid 2, what sets AM2R apart most is how your main goal of killing Metroids is just somehow in the background or everything else. Yes, you do need to do this in order to progress in the game, but it's so easy to forget that's what you're supposed to be doing. I really don't know how to describe this. I think it's a combination of Metroids mostly being in the main exploring path, so you can't miss any as long as you look around, and exploration just being plain fun. Because despite the fact that this is a fan game, it controls just as well as the official ones, better in some areas. I wasn't too big on the wall jump at first. It's been restored to its full Super Metroid glory, but you get so little height from it that it was hard to use. But then you get the high jump and it's never felt better. And seeing how you can already scale any wall with a spider ball, wall jumping just lets you do it faster. Otherwise, it plays pretty similar to Zero Mission, but you have a few options to further customize that. There's 2-button diagonal aiming like Super, toggling between missiles and beam instead of just holding the R button or whatever. You can even turn off the low health beeping if you want. Why do more games not have this option? I mean, it's a nice warning, but come on, I'm almost dead, I get it, shut up already. AM2R has a morph ball button too. Yeah, thanks. Although it doesn't feel as good as in Samus Returns. It felt like you kept some of your upward momentum, which helped boost you toward the hole you were likely trying to get into, but you just kinda drop instantly here. It's a minor issue, but the power grip at least lets you get into small holes quickly. Ledge grabbing is a bit too sensitive though. I often climbed up 1 or 2 tile ledges instead of jumping, and that got annoying. But hey, you can turn it off if you get really annoyed by it. Just like every other ability. Seriously man, there isn't much reason to want to toggle abilities, but it's so cool that you can do that to begin with. It really goes to show how much care was put into this. But that care is more obvious in all the new additions. A big problem with the original is how most bosses are just Metroids, so there's plenty of non-Metroid bosses this time. Like there was a Chozo statue fight that's totally normal at first, but then it sprouts wings and you have to chase after it with your new space jump. I always liked having a boss that you have to fight using a new ability, like getting the equivalent to the gravity suit and then having to fight the Alpha Blog immediately after. And speaking of Prime 2, the Flying Chozo statue uses a remix of the Chica fight, oddly enough. There was also this fight with this defense robot thing, and learning how to dodge its attacks was pretty fun. It took me a few tries, too. Even the Metroid fights themselves have been totally revamped. Alphas and Gammas are mostly the same, but they're often fought in arenas that make fighting them more interesting, like having limited ground to stand on. I especially like the 1 or 2 times you fight a Gamma that destroys the sand around you. You have to be careful not to let it destroy too much of it. And having to fight like 5 alphas at once was a great change of pace. I often had to try to manipulate the AI into moving above me and hit their weak spot in their stomach instead of just spamming missiles until they died. You end up being able to do that anyway, but it feels more earned now that you've learned how to fight them efficiently. They sprout legs at the Zeta stage, so you have to aim your shots at their stomach, almost like you would in Mega Man. These guys are difficult too. You often have to fight them in tight spaces, so there's not a whole lot of room to dodge. Omegas though, yeah, they nerfed them too much. I remember these guys being stupidly hard on 1.0, but they're probably the easiest stage now. You have enough super missiles to kill them in like 30 seconds by the time you fight any. Running out of supers isn't even a problem, because all your missiles and health get recharged at save points. Health refills at save points is fine, but missiles just feel like overkill. I get that they never wanted you to farm for ammo or health, but it's been overcorrected. Periodic ammo stations like in every other game would have been preferable to me. Look, it's just hard to see these guys as big and menacing when they go down so easily you don't even have time to be intimidated. But I'll take it over the damage sponge Omegas of the originals. At least the enemy variety is better in this one. By the end of the game, it didn't feel like I was still fighting the same stuff all the time. Even the Metroid encounters tend to spice things up often enough. They fit in great with the new area themes too. It's pretty hard to tell what's new and old at points. But that's the great thing about the areas in AM2R. They feel like interpretations of the original. Like the first area is just this temple that resembles the one from Zero Mission, but the second area had these pipes lying around. So this place is clearly a water processing plant. Or the place with all the sand everywhere has to be some mining operation. And there's even a minigame where we take control of this little mining robot. That's super cool. So cool that Buildin actually made a separate game based on this. It's called Skippy the Bot. It's a fun little game, but there's not much to really say about it. It's a neat way to spend 15 minutes. If anything, it's funny that he somehow managed to take the one non-copyright infringing thing from AM2R and make something unique from it. Probably my favorite area was where they saw the one place where you can easily swap between your beams and turn it into a high-tech weapons depot. This is all brand new stuff, but it feels new in a way that's faithful to the original, because all the mechanics from Metroid 2 are still here. They've just been expanded upon or recontextualized. You don't have to slowly crawl up these pipes with a spider ball anymore. You can just have them shoot you across to the other side. And they even show up later as a way to get around to new places, old ones too. Yeah, they somehow figure out a way to naturally fit in a form of fast travel. I just wish it wasn't in the last normal area. Not getting access to this until that late is kinda stupid. But at the same time, you never have to go back to previous areas, so I wasn't bothered by the lack of fast travel for most of the game. One thing that AM2R does really well is its environmental storytelling. Because there's this scout team that went through SR388, but you never heard much about them past the intro. Samus Returns had a few dead Federation troopers near the beginning, but I didn't even notice them being there until I played the game on an emulator in HD. Meanwhile, AM2R has a whole mini area dedicated to these guys. You find this camp filled with dead troopers only for some Metroid to pop out at you, and it's suddenly obvious how they all died. It really goes to show how much of a power difference there is between Samus and the average Federation trooper. These things took out a whole squad of these guys, and she takes them down like it's nothing. And when you come back to this place after you get power bombs, you get a giant-ass Fusion reference as you go around their abandoned ship, complete with a working Fusion save station and the freaking cave from Fusion's intro cutscene. How do you even come up with details like this? You can read all the research they have on Metroids too, which is an awesome touch. I'm not sure how canon most of this information is, but it feels pretty close to what I know about Metroid lore. Oh, and there's this guy with a total horde-on for bounty hunters and really wants to meet Samus to have a drink with them. Man, just wait until he finds out that Zelda's the princess. They also have some weird experiment in the back for some reason, which you fight for an energy tank. Wait, for some reason? No, these are the guys that ordered genocide and then later cloned that species anyway. These people have way more than just skeletons in their closet. My only big complaint with AM2R is that the endgame just feels kinda there. I like that there's this Metroid hive where we fight 3 Omegas and do nothing else, but with how badly they're nerfed, fighting them feels too quick and easy. Zetas are far more threatening. And the walkway to that big vertical room in the end still plays the music from the Hive, and it kinda ruins the atmosphere. I know it was like that in the original, but the new Hive music feels too intense for this. It felt more foreboding before, which fit the area more. It's minor, but it doesn't have the right kind of vibe for what it is. I do like this version of the Metroid Queen though. It feels like an expanded version of the original, albeit it's pretty easy, but the original Queen was easy when you knew what to do. Look, at least one of these games finally has the sense to keep the Metroid counter at 1 when the baby's born. I get that someone might be confused by it, but it's so obvious that you can't kill it, I don't think anyone ever was. I feel like I might have glossed over AM2R, but this is the 3rd time I've talked about Metroid 2. What else can I really say? It wasn't a game I particularly jived with, and after Samus Returns, I assumed the repetitive structure was my main issue with it. You repeated a lot of the same bosses and enemies, and did the same thing in each area with not much variety. But AM2R shows that a lot more could have been done to alleviate that. You fight a lot of Metroid, sure, but you also spend a lot of time doing other stuff. Most of the time, I never even had to consciously look for these things. I found them just by exploring like I would have done anyway. And despite the fact that you have the same goal no matter where you end up next, each area is different enough that it never feels boring. So much care was put into this game to improve the repetitious structure that it's easy to forget just how samey everything feels in the original. This guy basically made a legit Metroid game. It may not be an official one, but it's just as good, which is obviously not an easy thing to do. You could put AM2R on Switch and sell it for actual money, and I would be able to go the whole game thinking it was an official product. Like seriously, if you put this game on your resume, you might as well just be hired right on the spot. And that's kind of what happened. No one got hired by Moon Studios to work on Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Wisps. Why is that so hard to say? Yeah, there he is. After how good that game turned out, his talent isn't going to waste, which is an amazing thing to hear. So many fan games get taken down and we never hear from their developers again. It's a shame that plenty of young game devs just get discouraged and give up. But hey, we live in a timeline where a separate group of fans were able to improve AM2R and the original creator was able to work on similar games because of it. With current copyright laws, that's about the best outcome you can really get, especially when Nintendo is involved. So yeah, play AM2R. Hell, play Samus Returns too. While they may be remakes of the same game, they're both worth playing. One doesn't replace the other. Cancelled games have always been fascinating to me. Plenty of stuff gets made with the intention of being released, only for complications behind closed doors causes it to never see the light of day. It's one thing when it's something that doesn't look interesting, but when it looks like something you'll like, it can be heartbreaking to hear that you'll never get to play it. I'm not much of a horror guy, but PT showed the sheer potential of the Kojima-directed Silent Hill, and Konami would rather pretend that it doesn't exist. Or what about seeing the presumable conclusion of Mega Man Legends after the cliffhanger of the second game? Never mind. What about a game I platinum about going on fantasy adventures with a dragon? Too bad. But every now and then, a previously cancelled game does see the light of day. A new 2D Metroid was enough to hype me up, but any Metroid fan at the time would have instantly gone insane when they found out it was called Metroid Dread. I know, because that person was me. I was talking about me. This game was originally going to be on DS, but apparently they tried 2 separate times to get it to work, but it just wasn't happening. And after how Samus Returns turned out, they just had Mercury Steam make the game that's apparently been in execution hell for over a decade. And the pre-release was like walking into a parallel universe. Nintendo was promoting the hell out of this game. This was their holiday title, even celebrating the Metroid anniversary over the Zelda one. At best, I thought we'd get a Prime Trilogy HD to hold us over for Prime 4, not a brand spanking new game that actually continues the story after Fusion. Literally the exact thing that I wanted the most. It wasn't just Nintendo either. A ton of people were super hyped for Dread. It was one of the most pre-ordered Switch games from multiple retailers, and even made the older games in the series resurge in popularity. A lot of people were playing Metroid for the first time in anticipation, and honestly, I never thought I'd see the day. My coverage of 2D Metroid was not because of Dread. I was doing this anyway. I even had to rewrite a section for Fusion and change a few things here and there. It was annoying, but happy kind of annoying. Sometimes things just work out. The only irritating thing was this really loud vocal minority that was like, this looks like a DS game, and it was like, bitch, have you even played the DS game? Look, I get that different people expect different things out of a $60 game, but it was one of those times I really just wanted to yell, shut up and let me enjoy things. Then the game came out a few months later. Like, it wasn't just satisfying, it was my personality that month. I played Dread twice within the week that it came out. Once just playing it normally, and another time trying out all the sequence breaks that I was too small-brained to figure out on my own. It was wonderful. But if I'm being honest, after playing through almost every main series Metroid game, and Axiom Verge 2, and replaying Hollow Knight, all in the same year, I was a little Metroidvania'd out. Yeah, despite making videos about all the 2D Metroids, I also replayed Prime 1 and 2, just for fun. But it's been almost 3 years since then. We now live in the alternate reality where Prime Trilogy HD is a third of the way real, and Prime 4 has a release window. Wait, what did I just say? It's been almost 3 years since Dread? No, that can't be right, hold on. 2024 minus 2021 equal... No! It has not been 3 years. I'm wrong. I'm spreading misinformation on the internet. Anyway, it's been quite some time since Metroid Dread came out. I didn't want to make a big dedicated video on it back then because I was tired and wanted to move on with my life, but more importantly, I didn't want recency bias to show or anything. I was planning on making this sooner, maybe like a year and a half-ish later, but life happened, I was doing other videos, I just didn't get around to it. I haven't actually played the game since the week after it came out, so despite injecting the game directly into my veins upon release, I'm going back into this mostly fresh. But look, I'm tired of waiting, it's finally time to talk about Metroid 5. Dread starts off, once again, with a recap of the other games. You know, it's really weird having another game in this series being like, okay, we know you didn't play the last game, here's what happened so far. But given that it's been like 20 years without a brand new 2D entry, I'll let it slide. The recap is brief enough to not bother old players anyway. Besides, it sets up for what happens after Fusion. Despite the X seemingly wiped out from blowing up that research station, it turns out they survived on some other random planet known as ZDR. They sent these robots to try and scout the area, but they went dark, so the Galactic Federation needs someone to figure out what happened to them. Seeing as Samus is the only one immune to the X-parasites that, by the way, are an even bigger threat than Metroids, it's up to her to stop their spread for good this time. But you might be wondering, wait a minute, didn't Samus straight up disobey her orders and blew up the BSL and the X along with it? She destroyed the Federation's Metroid cloning facility. She was supposed to just wait in the room and twiddle her thumbs for a bit. Why would the Federation continue to work with her? Why would she continue to work with an organization that tried to recreate a galactic threat? Well, apparently the English version of Fusion forgot to mention there was actually a rogue group within the Federation that did all the shady stuff. I mean, it seems a bit suspicious to ask for a perfect recreation of the planet that they were literally in orbit around, so yeah, that checks out. The Federation is just as incompetent as ever. Although, to be honest, the old Federation Army, or whatever this rogue group is supposed to be called, could have also just been working with the Federation anyway, and this was a convenient way to shift the blame on someone else. But I don't speak anime, so I don't know what actually happened. You know, it's actually kind of disappointing learning about this mistranslation after Dread came out, because by omitting this rogue group, they accidentally made a more interesting narrative that makes you curious about where it's going next. But I guess that was just an oopsie. Anyway, back to Dread. Samus arrives on ZDR only to be greeted by a living Chozo that then beats her unconscious, and she loses all of her abilities again. So yeah, this is just Tuesday to her. And that's where the game actually starts. You play through a tutorial section, slowly you're gaining your basic abilities, the usual. This should sound pretty familiar if you've played one of these games before, but what's pretty cool is you go an uncomfortable amount of time without the Morph Ball. You know, basically the first ability you get in every game. Sometimes you even have it right from the start. That's because you can slide now. The much better alternative to Metroid finally learning to crawl. It really feels like a natural extension of the Morph Ball. The Morph Ball is basically an upgrade to the slide. Then you can go underneath long gaps instead of just small ones, and you'll be able to go underneath gaps that aren't on the floor, like climbing into a vent or something like that. Not having this thing feels so bizarrely natural. There are times in the early game that I tried to get a missile tank only to remember that I don't have the Morph Ball yet. Even when you finally get the Morph Ball, it's so much snappier to slide into small gaps instead of needing to morph than unmorph. A lot of the time you even unmorph automatically when you come out of small passageways. That's basically what Dread feels like to control. It's about what you remember, but heavily modernized. Like, why make wall jumping, an optional ability, so complicated to use? Just jump again when you're touching a wall. Even if you can't climb single walls with it, the simpler wall jump makes the game way smoother to control when they're just running around and exploring. There's the argument that in Super and Zero Mission, part of what made the mechanics so compelling was that it made you feel like you were breaking the game's rules, even though you weren't. But in a game like Dread or Fusion, where you can't climb up single walls, there isn't any point in making it complicated. Just let the player do it. They didn't cover up half the walls with goop like they did in Samus Returns either. So the wall jump just makes the game feel smoother to play instead of being a sequence breaking tool. That's not to say that Dread doesn't have any optional sequence breaks, because it does, and it's wonderful. Well, we'll get into that later. Honestly, the only criticism I really have of the controls this time is that the Morph Ball moves a tad too slow for my liking. That's pretty much it. Not being able to move with a D-pad is weird, but I can live with it. You rarely do any precise platforming, so it's not really a big deal. I just don't understand why you can't move with it. The D-pad doesn't really do anything. It just lets you expand the minimap and use the scan pulse. Why not use the right stick to expand the minimap? You can even move it around that way. And seriously, what's the point in doing this otherwise? You can literally just open the map instead. And why not have the scan pulse work by holding down A when you're standing still? I doubt it would get in the way of the flash shift. I don't know, I just feel like they could have done a little more to free up the D-pad to at least give you the option to play with it. The map design is actually a lot tighter than I remember. The game just has this weird, almost invisible way of making the way forward pretty obvious. Like, there was one part where I figured that I was trying to destroy one of the central units to destroy one of the enemies, but I wasn't sure how to get over there. So I looked at the map and it just looked like there was some path that I missed over in Berenia. I went over there and sure enough, there was some explodey block thing that I missed. I think part of their solution to keep you from getting lost is locking you into a specific area a lot of the time. Like, early on, you have to change the flow of these thermal tubes and doors open and close, changing the amount of area that you can explore. Stuff like this was kind of confusing on my first playthrough because I wasn't used to games like this doing that. I didn't expect the game to just trap me in a smaller area to figure out the way forward easier. But this time, the game just felt so natural to go through that I almost completely forgot that it did this. which is why I couldn't come up with any more examples. I don't remember any other places that it locks you into temporarily. For how annoyed I was about this the first time playing, it's kind of shocking how I barely noticed it now. I think the only times I got lost this playthrough was from not noticing a fake or explodey block. The game isn't even that backtrack heavy either. They solve that by having these teleportals to go back to older areas. These things are basically two-way portals between two parts of the map. So instead of going all the way back to the beginning of the game just to immediately run back after getting the Varia suit, you can just use the portal that's on the way to where you're supposed to go anyway. It's a good compromise from Samus Returns approach, where they just put a bunch of fast travel stations everywhere and you barely have to explore old areas at all. My only problem with the teleportals is how long the animations are. Like, you have to watch a 9-second animation just to have a yes-no dialogue box. With load times, this whole process takes nearly an entire minute, which doesn't sound long, but it's an eternity compared to how fast the game usually feels. The load times already make this process take longer than it should. The game probably loads as fast as it reasonably can on Switch, but just let me skip the animation. It would make this entire process so much faster. But at least it's better than backtracking. That's not to say that Dread doesn't have any backtracking. It's a Metroidvania. You're gonna have to engage in search action. You're bound to get lost at some point, but it's been kept to a minimum. Although the few times I did get lost definitely hurt. It wasn't because I needed an ability that I didn't know about or anything. It was almost solely because of some minute detail I didn't notice at first. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, that's kind of what my early experiences with Metroid were like. I remember getting stuck in that one room in Fusion where you have to place a bomb to raise a platform. There's no indication that a bomb would do that. Or that one part where I have to guide an X on this blob thing so that he can freeze it to have enough room to use the speed booster. I just didn't realize that was a mechanic on my first playthrough. I wouldn't call this kind of thing bad game design or anything, but there's really got to be some way to make it more clear. Maybe those explodey block stuff, some kind of glow to make them not blend into the environment so much. I don't think we have to go straight to painting everything yellow, but there's got to be something they can do so that it's easier to notice this stuff. I think it might just be this inherent problem with transitioning the graphics to 3D. Even if this game looks significantly better than a DS game, it's just hard to figure out where fake blocks are at times. If you ever take the time to look around 3D games, they just have a lot of weird imperfections. Like, don't look at the food stand in the market in Fire Emblem 3 Houses. Just ignore it. There comes a point where we're just conditioned to ignore small inconsistencies in 3D games. The only thing they can really do is put in subtle hints that you can interact with something. Like putting enemies on top of fake blocks in that one room. You know the one. The room that the guy who directed the first few God of War games complained about. Seriously, man, I shot at these things subconsciously the first time playing. I didn't even remember what room he was talking about because of how little it fazed me. I will reiterate that I did get lost my first time playing. I just never got mad about it because I expected it when playing this kind of game. When you have to design the world to be non-linear and maze-like, it's gonna happen. You just have to make sure that you properly guide the player on where to go next. Some people don't like Metroid Prime's hint system that basically says, go here. But it's a pretty good solution on nudging the player in the right direction, especially when you can turn it off. Honestly, you could just steal this for the next game. No one's gonna mind. Probably the only thing that really interrupts the flow of exploration are the new Emmy zones, but I think it's intentional. When you have a robot roaming around that you can't kill and will kill you almost instantly, you need to tread carefully. It's like the SAX sections in Fusion turned up to 11. While I did say that the SAX encounters weren't scripted, that's only half true, because it's still a Game Boy Advance game. You can choose to just get yourself killed, but the SAX doesn't have any complex behaviors and you can manipulate it really easily. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about how it was implemented in Fusion. They somehow used it to get this unparalleled atmosphere on a Game Boy Advance of all things. The device you use to play an unhealthy amount of Pokemon. It's just that this kind of heavily scripted, very simple AI doesn't work on modern hardware, usually. So to recreate that kind of tense feeling, but on an enemy with actual behaviors, is really impressive. You have to be really careful about how you move through the Emmy zones. If you don't, you will die. Why the Federation decided to make scouting robots out of almost completely indestructible material is beyond me, but it definitely makes for a good challenge. These zones really make the game feel like a survival horror game, to the point where it's really difficult to describe these places without using the title of the game. Not that I dreaded having to go into these places, but they are absolutely areas that you only go through when you know you have to. And for that, the Emmy zones get my certified sticker of approval. My problem with the Emmys is that you figure out how to avoid them by the end of the game. So when you replay the game, they're just annoying. It's hard to describe how. You just learn to pick up on how they move around and what makes them detect where you are. Obviously, I still got caught, but when you know that the only penalty is getting sent back like 2 minutes at most, it's pretty hard to feel any kind of tension or pressure from these encounters. Yeah, the game makes a checkpoint when we go into an enemy zone, so dying in these places doesn't usually mean much. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. The game already has pretty frequent save rooms, so what, you just restart your last save? Because then getting caught by one is even more annoying. All that would do is make it take longer to walk back to where we were before. So, I mean, I guess I'm fine with the checkpoint thing? Probably? Look, when you know how to deal with these things, dying in one is just a minor inconvenience. You could say skill issue because they give you a chance to get away with a melee counter, but apparently you not only have to do this near frame perfect input, but you also have to win an RNG roll. So you can do everything right and the game just kills you anyway. Obviously it's supposed to make you want to avoid them, but the worst case scenario is just being forced to go back a few rooms. Having areas where you're being hunted like a dog without taking away any of your abilities is insanely cool on paper, but it only feels like 80% of the way there in practice. You don't even get the satisfaction of killing them and getting a new ability, because once you destroy the central unit in the area to power up your beam, you still have to fire the Omega Stream in the enemy long enough to destroy his face shielding. Then you can fire your Omega Blast to kill it. The Omega Stream is just unnecessary. The damage you do to it has to be done all at once, so it turns into a puzzle to find the long hallway that lets you kill it. But most of the time I end up missing my shots for part of it, and I have to wait until the enemy is in position again so I can start over. You go through all this trouble trying to avoid these things, and when you finally get the opportunity to get rid of it, it's still a pain in the ass. I would have much rather had the opportunity to one-shot this thing like it was nothing. But hey, at least you get a new ability out of it. Oh yeah, I haven't really talked about the abilities in this game yet. First new ability you run into is the Spider Magnet, which lets you climb on blue walls. It's a pretty nice addition that gives you a lot more mobility, and it lets the game be a bit more vertical with this level design way before you get the space jump. And I love how single wall jumping still works on blue walls. You're doing something that you can already do, but this lets you do it faster. Hiding from enemies gets a lot more interesting after you get the Phantom Cloak. Being able to turn invisible in a stealth section is as useful as you'd expect, but it doesn't work if the enemy already found you or if you bump into it. The Phantom Cloak is just there to give you another way to hide. It's not an ignore stealth mechanics button. Although I found myself not using it after a while because it was easy to run past these guys in a lot of cases. You still needed to get past a door on occasion, but it's still one of those abilities that's more useful on paper. The Phantom Cloak also uses Aeon energy, but it's been tweaked from how it works in Samus Returns. In Dread, it's just a meter that recharges when you're not using it, and you can't use another Aeon ability until it's recharged. It's a meter you'll mostly forget about because it charges near instantly after using the Flash Shift, which is a dashing move in Metroid. Dude, the moment I realized what this was, I felt every neuron in my brain activate at once. You can dodge attacks, extend the horizontal length of your jumps, get past these shutter doors, move faster in bursts, avoid enemies and die horribly anyway because you're bad at video games. They literally just stole a mechanic from Hollow Knight and I'm all for it. Flash Shift, my beloved. But while the Flash Shift is peak, the other new abilities aren't so great. The Pulse Radar is an optional mid-game ability that's just a worse version of the Scan Pulse from Samus Returns. Not that that's a bad thing, it kinda destroyed any reason to explore in that game. Here it only shows you the hidden blocks around you, and you have to hold right on the D-pad for a few seconds before it can activate. It's not quite as convenient as just pressing the A button, so by reducing its usefulness and making it awkward to activate, they fixed the Scan Pulse. Now it's just something you use when you don't feel like shooting every block desperately hoping you find something. It's obviously still useful, but I ended up forgetting it was even there after a while. And that's how I feel about a lot of the other new abilities in Dread. Cross bombs are essentially there to make infinite bomb jumping easier, but you get them so late that they're not really that useful. All it does is let you cross highly specific crumbling block bridges. The spin booster just feels unnecessary. It's just a double jump. Having an extra upgrade before the space jump is fine, but you get this, then you get the space jump like 40 minutes later. They just needed to be spaced out more. Maybe have the spin booster be more around when you get the Varia suit or something. You know, maybe like 40-ish% of the way through the game. The storm missiles are something that's at least useful. They're basically just the secret missiles from the Prime games, but you can also use them on enemies, and they're the fastest damage output in the game. You're gonna chew through missiles like it's nothing when you do this, but you have enough missiles playing the game normally that storm missiles just become your main damage output in the end game. It doesn't really change the dynamic of combat much like flash shifting does, but it reduces the amount of button matching, so it's a pretty nice addition overall. Okay, yeah, Dread does have quite a few new abilities, way more than I remembered. But the reason why I forgot about most of them is because there's like 3 really good ones, while the rest are upgrades that you just completely forget about by the end. If I had to give any major gripe toward Dread, it's probably that. The game just falls into the usual Metroidvania trope of having more abilities than the designers know what to do with. Something that the other 2D games never really fell victim to that much. There was maybe like 1 useless ability by the end, but here there's like 3 or 4. Not that it's a big deal, but I really hope they either find more use for this stuff in the future or just give you less abilities. Which doesn't sound like a good change, but it's really satisfying to have less abilities that do more stuff. Animal Well is a pretty recent example of that. Not to spoil much about that game, but just know that your abilities in Animal Well have a ton of different uses. It's something that a lot of games like this should be taking notes from. The order you get these abilities in aren't set in stone either, because they actually did leave in sequence breaks for craftier players to find. And in case you think that has unintended flaws in the game design, they put in a quick kill on Kraid with unique animations if you get bombs early. So yeah, most of the sequence breaks this time are completely intentional. And that's really damn cool. I'm not gonna go into a ton of detail with how they work in this game, but they're kind of like Zero Mission where you have to do some really crafty stuff to pull them off. Like, I didn't know you could jump out of a slide like this. Definitely the coolest one is where you have to take the speed booster through a cold area before you get the gravity suit to get super missiles early. It's just one of those things the game doesn't stop you from doing. The average player would see the cold and turn back without thinking about it. The funniest sequence break has to be the early screw attack though. Normally you have to wait until after you defeat the experiment to unfreeze Otaria, but you can just run through an area that's only slightly hidden and you can get it anyway. Like, this vent doesn't stop you from entering it. You can either do a cheeky shine spark to get in there, or you can just use a space jump, both of which you normally have by this point. From there, you just move west and destroy a few fake blocks. It's shockingly easy for something that's supposed to be a sequence break. I'd imagine that a few players just found this exploring around normally. The early gravity suit is probably the epitome of that though. Yes, I know it's pronounced epitome now. I genuinely thought it was pronounced epitome. English is weird. Anyway, it's a long series of shine sparks that isn't hard to figure out if you're a thorough and exploring. Like, I saw a few people on social media think this is how you're supposed to get the gravity suit, and were shocked to later find out they actually did it the hard way. But my favorite sequence break is how the space jump is technically optional. Because if you do all the major skips, you'll end up in Ferenia with almost all of your abilities you need to finish the game. So you do some cleanup and then make your way to Hanubia to fight the final boss. But with a lot of shine sparking in the final sequence, you don't actually need to get the space jump. It makes the game a lot more annoying, but you technically don't need it, which is really cool. I kinda wish the storm missiles were optional though. There's these switches that only activate with storm missiles, and despite showing that they activate without storm missiles, as far as I know, the game's hard-coded to only truly activate these switches with storm missiles. Obviously, it would make these a lot more annoying to activate, but it would just be cool as all. The bosses are really well designed though, and it's where the combat of this game shines. Even from the first boss with the invisible guy, learning attack patterns is vital to win. It's like Fusion where you can't tank damage. You have to hit specific weak points, sometimes slide under stuff, hit melee counters to do a ton of damage. This dude teaches you everything you need to know about fighting bosses in this game. Every boss in Dread has this weird flow to it the first time. You get your ass kicked, but you keep trying and slowly get better, until eventually your winning attempt has you basically at full health. There was rarely a time where I just barely scraped by. The bosses are so tightly designed that you won't just beat them, you'll curb stomp them. And on a replay, they're still pretty fun fights for the most part. I really like that they chose to bring back Kraid instead of Ridley. It's not that I don't mind a new Ridley fight, it's just that it wouldn't really make much sense. He's supposed to be dead and they don't have the X-Parasite excuse to fall back on. We've seen Ridley so many damn times and having a new fight against Kraid is just cool. Why is he on ZDR though? I don't know, whatever. The weirdest boss in this game is probably this squid thing. I didn't understand that this dude was more of a puzzle at first, and it took me a few tries to even figure out what I was supposed to do. How you beat him isn't particularly aggravating or anything. This dude isn't the Spider Guardian, but it's definitely this bizarre outlier from the other bosses. Not a bad thing, just memorable for reasons you wouldn't expect. The experiment isn't nearly as hard as other people say it is. The only reason why I died so much this time is because I tried getting the quick kill on him with a shine spark, but I was so bad at it that I won pretty much the instant I gave up trying to do it. I didn't want to show my raw gamer skills with crappy Switch share button footage, but I have no choice. But weirdly enough, these excellent bosses lead into my only real issue with Dread. The game's difficulty is a total roller coaster. On your first playthrough, you will die. A lot. But on your second playthrough after you learn all the boss patterns, the game's piss easy. Since the game's so easy to me now, I tried out hard mode. They definitely didn't lie about that. but I felt that hard was a little too hard. Not that it was impossible or anything, it's just that you take way too much damage and I end up in situations where I'm dying to random enemies every 5 seconds. It definitely made health stations a lot more of a relief, but it was giving me flashbacks to Metroid 1 where I was having a grind for health pickups. This is not a compliment. So just as a warning for any new players that for some reason want spoiled on this game, Metroid Dread is the hardest game in the series. But they did add an easy mode, so if you don't like hard games, just play on rookie mode. Also, stop watching this and buy the game right now. This is not optional. They also added Dread mode after you beat hard mode, where health upgrades become purely cosmetic, but neither option balances the game's difficulty for me. Either I play on normal and I can play it in my sleep, or I play it on hard and I die every 5 seconds. There's no comfortable middle ground. Hard mode isn't fun to me. I'd rather just play on normal despite complaining about how easy it is. This is how Halo fans feel about Halo 2 on Legendary. Honestly, I can barely play that game on normal, let alone Legendary. But since we're talking about complaints, the music in this game is just kinda meh. It's not bad, I just don't remember any of it. The music has the same problem as Samus Returns. It's too atmospheric. I'm not gonna repeat the same stuff I said about the music in that video. Just know that these complaints are worse here, because I can at least remember some of the music from Samus Returns. I can't remember anything from Dread. I think I like the music in Artaria and the water place, whatever that's called. But if you held a gun up to my head and told me to hum any tune from Metroid Dread, I'd just say shoot me, because I wouldn't be able to do it. At this point, the only thing left to talk about is the story, which there was a surprising amount of in Dread. Honestly, I would put up a spoil warning or something, but I already told the people who haven't played Dread to get out of here and play it already. And if I haven't convinced you to play the game by now, that's on you. So, anyway, Samus dies. No, I'm kidding. After Samus gets her ass kicked at the beginning of the game, nothing really happens other than the usual regather all of Samus's abilities that she conveniently forgot to bring with her. But about halfway through the game, Samus meets another living Shozo. He's actually friendly this time and finally explains what's going on. So Ravenbeak's original plan was to use the Metroids as a weapon to take over the galaxy, but in order to do that, he needed the Thoha tribe who have the power to control the Metroids. So instead of enslaving them, he just killed all of them aside from this guy. Okay. The friendly Chozo's name is Quiet Road, by the way. You know, if they could control the Metroids, could Ravenbeak have enslaved them? They could have just used his own weapon against them. Maybe I'm thinking about this too much. Anyway, they were gonna bring back all the Metroids as EDR to build up an army, but one of the soldiers that were brought back from SR-388 turned out to be an X-Parasite, which wiped out all of Ravenbeak's tribe. Even if he did somehow manage to contain the X. But hey, we still got the Metroids, we can still take over the galaxy. But then Samus killed all of them in Metroid 2, which made Ravenbeak completely rage quit his entire plan. Even if this is a retcon, I actually really like how they figured out a way to make the events of Metroid 2 more impactful for the galaxy at large. Even if you disagree with what Samus was ordered to do, it did end up preventing a war in the end. Obviously, messing with the ecosystem caused the Exes to sprout up again, but it definitely made the consequences of Metroid 2 a lot more interesting. If Metroid 2 didn't happen, we would have had a drastically different timeline where there was a galaxy-scale Metroid war. Maybe that'd be a cool thing to explore in a different game. Ravenbeak's plan would have ended right there, but as we've known for the last 20 years, the Metroids weren't completely wiped out. So he lured Samus here with an X-Parasite, knowing that she wouldn't just sit by and take the chance of the galaxy getting wiped out. Like, why did you think the enemies were so hell-bent on killing Samus? They're scouting robots, meant to be able to withstand any threat while they gathered data. They were hacked by Ravenbeak to search for Metroid DNA. By taking Samus's Metroid DNA, he could start over, rebuild his army, and rule with an iron fist. After hearing about all this, Samus is just like, don't worry, I'll end this. Which is all she really needed to say, honestly. If a situation like this comes up in Prime 4, I hope Retro's taking notes. So anyway, Quiet Robe dies. I can't be the only person who got a good laugh out of this. I mean, yeah, it sucks. Samus finally finds a sole survivor of the species and culture that raised her that isn't an asshole, and he dies instantly. This is exactly where I expected this conversation to go, which is why I always thought this was so funny. The plot is pretty simple from here on out. Samus goes to the X quarantine in an attempt to get rid of him, but oops, Ravenbeak let all the X out. Well, looks like we gotta blow up this planet too. A really awesome detail is that from here on out, the X act as health and ammo pickups. Just like on the PSL and Fusion, it doesn't take long for the X to overtake everything on CDR. A few bosses even give you a new ability in the form of an X that you need to absorb, and they even use it in the fight against you. Again, this is the best trope. Although, to be honest, the latter part of the game goes by a little too quickly for me. They throw way too many abilities at you at once. Like, you get the cross bombs, wave beam, and power bombs all right after the other. Pretty much the instant you kill the purple Emmy, it's just like, oh hey, here's the orange Emmy now. I actually really like that the final Emmy goes down like it's nothing after it ambushes you, because they're just so used to dealing with these things by this point that the wave beam Emmy poses no threat. It's just annoying. So to see this final Emmy ambush you and Samus saying, no, Die is a nice subversion of expectations. They did powerbomb upgrades in a weird way, though. Instead of using power bombs to pretty much only get more power bombs, you can get more power bombs earlier, but they won't work until you actually obtain power bombs. I get why they did it this way, it just feels weird in practice. Like, you see this thing and you know it's power bombs, there's no reason to hide it. Why even give the player power bombs so late? They don't really do much in this game. All they do is destroy a few specific blocks. They do a lot of damage to random enemies, sure, but they already go down so quickly that I don't think it's that big of a deal. It just ends up being this bizarre game design decision for arbitrary reasons. Not that I think it detracts from the game as a whole or anything, it's just a weird thing about the game. But, I should probably mention the part where Samus is just able to defeat the Emmy without the Omega Cannon. Well, it turns out that the Metroid DNA inside of her is awakening, meaning that she can now absorb energy like a Metroid can. And she's actually been doing it the whole game. Like, literally in the first 15 minutes. It's really clever because it's something that you just never question. Like, Samus has weird alien space armor. Sure, she can probably do this. But with all the abilities in the game, you head up to Ravenbeak's ship. Dude's even got this weird lab that it was probably using to spy on you the whole game. Although, once you step foot on Ravenbeak's ship, the game makes the bizarre decision to connect all the teleporters without telling you. Having them all connect up at the end of the game is a good thing. I just don't understand why they can't tell you about it. Why not have a keycard or some kind of data Samus finds in his lab that connects them all up? It would have been a cool explanation for how he got around so fast. But you finally go to fight the guy, only to be greeted with another navigation room. As it turns out, the Adam we've been talking to since Samus arrived on ZDR was actually Ravenbeak the whole time. Now, this is pretty subtle for most of the game, but I'm kind of amazed that I didn't notice it on my first playthrough. The fake Adam calls her Samus instead of Lady, even though the real one does it multiple times in the opening cutscene. Maybe it's because I've only played Other M like halfway through. Once. Almost a decade ago. I'd imagine people who actually liked Other M saw through this dude instantly. Not to mention how he keeps talking about how strong Ravenbeak is and how Samus has no hope of defeating him. Like, this dude just stops trying by the end. What's fulfill your destiny supposed to mean, man? I guess that it means hand over your Metroid DNA. Also, Ravenbeak was apparently one of the Chozo that was used to give Samus her Chozo DNA, so he considers her his daughter, even though she isn't. There's like 3 or 4 guys ahead of you, dude. But, like, he wasn't bluffing, hyping himself up the whole game. This dude's the hardest boss in the game, maybe even the whole series. It's cool having a final boss that's so hard, because it makes all the pickups you've been collecting actually worth a damn for once. A few extra health tanks or missiles can make the difference between whether you win or lose. It's also really cool to have a final boss that has pretty much the same abilities as you. Well, except those other times. Despite the fact that this is like the 4th game to feature an endgame boss where he basically just fights Samus, Ravenbeak is actually tough enough to feel like he could beat Samus. She's evenly matched, and you can feel it through gameplay. Especially the part where he just rips off his wing without even flinching. Like, dude, you can't just do that. No joke, this fight took me almost an hour to beat on my first playthrough, but it never felt frustrating. It always felt like I was improving and then I could win if I just kept doing a little better. And by the time I did win, I was practically at full health. Like a lot of the other bosses, actually. I had the pattern down so well that I was able to beat this guy on my second try during my second playthrough. And that was even without the space jump to dodge this attack. Dude still took me like 40 minutes this time on hard. And I was just about to go get a few more pickups to help out, but turns out I didn't need it. It's a really satisfying fight to finally get through. Although after the fight, Ravenbeak just kind of wins anyway. Like, what? Just kidding. Samus is actually like, no, die, and absorbs all the energy on the ship and it crash lands in a crater. And like, Ravenbeak is taken over by an X and morphs into this Kraid Chozo monstrosity, and she just shoots it with a giant death ray. Like, she doesn't even bother absorbing the X either, she just vaporizes it. Now she's finally able to get back to her ship, but the planet's about to blow up for some reason. Like, what the hell was even in that ship? The escape sequence this time is kind of a power trip, honestly. Like, you know how he had the Hyper Beam in the end of Super Metroid? Dread's Hyper Beam is more like her final smash in Smash Brothers, except she can do it infinitely. Everything just dies. Her Metroid DNA is so out of control that Adam, the real Adam, has to warn Samus not to touch the ship because she'll drain it of his energy. But the Quiet Robe X comes in and lets her control her Metroid DNA, so it's okay in the end. This doesn't come out of nowhere. He was shown a while ago. I just didn't mention it because it wasn't relevant. I think it's implied that he can control himself as an X because of his Thoha DNA, which subsequently lets Samus control Metroids better. But in the moment, it's a pretty half-assed excuse for why she goes back to normal. That's the annoying thing about this ending. Things just happen and they don't really explain why. Like, for how willing they were to explain shit before, they just don't now. It's not really that big of a deal, it's just awkward. The end screens definitely feel more awkward though. In previous games, you got different end screens, usually depending on how fast you beat the game. But in Dread, Samus just looks at the camera and here's her clear time. Like, you at least get different wallpapers that do look cool, but I don't know, it's not the same. Although I really like how Samus doesn't take off more of her clothes for players who beat the game faster. Like, not that I was complaining. I don't know, you have this really dignified, strong woman as your main protagonist, and then, like, you do this. I enjoy seeing the pretty lady in her underwear or skin-tight suit, but it always felt out of character to me. Like, it never felt blatantly sexualized or anything, but it still felt like something she wouldn't do. That said, I feel like they could have at least had her take off her helmet. Or hell, just have her wear a regular-ass outfit that isn't the Zero suit. Again, the wallpapers are cool, but they don't feel as cool or as iconic as Samus taking a breather to celebrate finishing the game. Although I really like the extra stats after the initial screen. It's a nice touch that I'm pretty sure was added in an update. Wait, this game took me 10 hours to get through? Like, keep in mind, I honestly did the bare minimum I could get away with, just because that's how I ended up playing it this time. I don't think the game is too long, per se, but I definitely prefer when I can get through these games in like 5 or 6 hours. I probably could have done this in about 8 hours when I didn't die 158 times, but at least it felt shorter than Samus Returns. Although that's probably because I like Dread way more than that game. Dread's length isn't really a bad thing, just kind of a personal preference thing. But Dread is weird, because while I've been describing a fantastic game, something about it just feels off. Talking about it in broad strokes is easy. The controls are incredible, the abilities are mostly fun to use, the world design is excellent and has very minimal backtracking when you really know what you're doing. The bosses are great challenges that really test your combat skills. Like, even just writing down my thoughts about it was a pretty good time. But it doesn't really feel that way after I'm done playing it. Maybe it's a side effect of putting less time into these videos. Not that I'm putting in less effort, necessarily. It's just that writing these scripts on and off over the course of a few weeks instead of all at once in like 5 or 6 days gives me more time to reflect on what I've played. I don't know, something about playing Metroid Dread just feels different. Like, whenever I play Prime 2, I'm always blown away by how much fun I'm having. I play this and it's just like, yeah, this is some peak shit right here. We are finally gaming. But I play Dread, and it just feels like business as usual. It's not like Hollow Knight or Symphony of the Night, where it's so easy to just lose myself in exploring these worlds for hours on end. In Dread, I find myself literally getting lost more often than being lost in it. Honestly, it can be part of the world design. You're always being funneled toward the next objective instead of just letting you naturally explore your own pace. Maybe Dread could learn some things from those games. In Hollow Knight and Symphony, it's pretty hard to get lost when you can just go in pretty much any direction and find something to do. You know, for the most part. I feel like Metroid would really benefit from that kind of philosophy. That's easier said than done, obviously. It's just that with how much Metroid has evolved with its controls and general game feel, the level design and progression hasn't really changed much. I don't know, maybe it's just a me thing. Maybe it's the weak late game that you blast through too quickly. Maybe it's the abrupt ending. Maybe the game is just too long enough to where I'm just over by the end. Maybe I've played too many of these kinds of games. Maybe it's a combination of all of the above. But Dread in the long term just ends up leaving me with an empty feeling. The kind of empty feeling that leaves you wanting more. And not in the positive, I want more of this right now kind of way, more in the negative, man kind of way, if that makes any sense. Which is weird to be saying about what I would consider my game of the year from 2021. I know I said it was Scarlet Nexus before, but I guess I was just blindsided about how good that game is. Metroid Dread is kind of similar to Samus Returns in that regard, although to a lesser extent. I was just happy that we finally got a new game in this series, but now that it's been a few years, I found that it's a game I don't like as much as when I first played it. It's still a game I love, obviously. I'm not trying to turn this into a it's no masterpiece kind of video. Metroid Dread did not fall off. It is not mid. It's just that now that I've finally sat down and sorted through my thoughts about it, I'm glad I didn't rush headfirst into talking about it as soon as it came out. It just went from a comically incredible game to just a really damn fantastic one. Opinions can have nuance. Nuance that you don't realize yourself until years later. But again, let's not bring up the quickly moving passage of time. Despite my own weird personal feelings that make me not like it quite as much as other people, Metroid Dread is probably the best all-around game in the series. While it doesn't quite match the peaks of the series for me, Dread has everything that makes Metroid so special. It's pretty easy to see why so many people consider this one to be their favorite. Dread is like if they took all the best parts of Zero Mission and Samus Returns and polished it to a fine sheen. This game can have its linear progression, guided tour cake, while also eating the sequence breaking the game in half cake. Those might actually be two different cakes now that I'm saying this out loud, but you get the idea. If Metroid Fusion was the antithesis of Metroid, a game that was designed to deconstruct everything about the series, then Metroid Dread is the thesis. This is Metroid. And it only took Mercury Steam 2 tries to get this right. Despite taking a lot of obvious inspiration from Fusion, Dread really does everything completely different from it. But this is the best selling game in this series, so I doubt I needed to tell you any of this. I just wasted the last 40 minutes of your life. Like, comment, and subscribe. Honestly, what else can I even say about this thing? It's been 3 years since I looked at the other 2D games, and I still love Metroid. To the shock of no one. Dread may only be like my 5th favorite game in the series, but they did good with this one. Damn good. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you all next mission.